Are we all ready to go? Shall I call this meeting to order? Hello, everybody, and welcome to this meeting of the Executive Board of the Greater Cambridge Partnership. Can you hear me okay? I never know what's going to happen with these mics. Before we start the meeting, can I welcome the Mayor, Dr. Nick Johnson? Where are you? I've lost him. He was here. Oh, there you guys are. Honestly. Anyway, let's start again. Can I welcome the Mayor, Dr. Nick Johnson, to attend the meeting in a non-voting capacity? He recognises, we recognise each other as partners in this endeavour, and the combined authority obviously is the Strategic Transport Authority, so welcome, Nick. The first item on our agenda is apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies? Anyone?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, we have apologies from Councillor Bridget Smith, and Councillor Brian Milnes is here as a substitute.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Nick, for that. Item number 2, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest from Executive Board members, please? Hello, Dave.
Chair, I'm a member of Cambridge Cycling Campaign.
Thank you, Dave. Is there anybody else at this point? If there isn't, you know the drill. Anything comes to mind at any point, please do raise it. Number 3, minutes of the previous meeting, which have been published in the agenda pack for the meeting today. Can I please confirm that the board is happy that the minutes are accurate, please? Shall we agree that the minutes are accurate? Everyone in favour? Excellent. In which case, I will sign the minutes of a correct record, which I will do now, since I remember. There we go. It'll be a first. I don't have to be chased for it. Agenda item number 4. I would like to report that the membership nominations have been received from the Business Board and the University of Cambridge, who, as you know, are non-voting members of this board. As per paragraph 2 of the report, we are recommended to confirm the appointment of Andy Williams as the Business Board representative on the Executive Board. Hi, Andy. Confirm the appointment of Alex Plant as Andy's substitute member. Confirm the appointment of Andy Neely as the University of Cambridge representative. Hello, and thank you, Andy. And confirm the appointment of Kamal Munir as Andy's substitute. Is everyone happy with these appointments? If so, all in favour, thank you very much indeed. Agenda item number 5, questions from members of the public. We have received 15 public questions relating to the following agenda items. There is 1 question on agenda item 7, which is public transport and city access. We have 10 questions on agenda item number 8, Cambourne, Cambridge. We have 2 questions on agenda item number 9, Cambridge Eastern Access, and 2 questions on agenda item 10, the Greenways. We have published details of these questions on the website, and we have all seen them as members of the Executive Board. And at the beginning of every relevant item on the agenda, we will have the relevant questions. We have some representatives from partner bodies which have submitted questions, and they have asked to speak to the board. At my discretion, these people are going to address the meeting at the beginning of the relevant agenda item. And that will follow the public questions. Assuming that's all okay, agenda item number 6 is feedback from the Joint Assembly. Now, as we know, Councillor Bick, who is with us today, he has given us a written report, which is in your agenda pack, We would like to, as always, thank Councillor Big for his report. He is used to presenting feedback from the Assembly at the beginning of each agenda item, so I take his nods as signal that we will do so today as well. In which case, agenda item number 7, public transport and city access strategy. You are on page, I believe, 24 of your agenda pack. This agenda item will be dealt with as follows. We have got public questions on the item, there's one. We have some representatives from the partner bodies which are going to address us, and they will speak next. Officers will respond to all the public questions. We will receive a presentation on the item. We will receive feedback from the Joint Assembly on the item, and we will then debate the proposals as a board. Assuming everyone is fine, could I please have Josh, my notes say, from Camp Cycle, who is asking the public question on this item? Thank you, Josh. Whenever you are ready. You know how to operate the microphone?
Yeah.
Excellent.
There we go. Thanks. In the Joint Assembly feedback, it was noted that doing nothing was clearly not an option, particularly given the climate crisis, the current transport situation in Greater Cambridge, and the cost of living crisis. The Assembly went on to recommend the need to listen to public feedback and how the consultation needs to be wide-ranging and accessible, including ensuring input from those who have traditionally been less likely to participate. The importance of these statements cannot be overlooked. Last week, whilst out promoting cycle parking, we were speaking to 2 teenagers who had just started at Hills Road College. We began to speak about congestion charging, and one of the students said, "Yes, Cambridge needs one of those." We told him now could be our best chance and spoke about the benefits of a scheme like this, in which include tackling climate change, building healthy lives, and delivering safe cycle routes, topics these young adults felt very strongly about. This consultation presents an opportunity for Cambridge to ask the public about a once-in-a-generational opportunity. To fully realise this opportunity, we must speak to people of all ages and backgrounds. Beyond just accessibility, the consultation process will need to engage and educate. How will the consultation reach people of all ages and demographics of society?
Thank you very much, Josh, for your question. Now, before we have answers, I think we should speak to our partner councillors who have indicated they would like to address the meeting. Before I invite the first one, just a note for all of them. We do require them to give us appropriate notice of the fact that they would like to speak to us. However, you are not required to ask a question as such. You are welcome to make any points you would like to address the board, and that you points that you would like us to consider. So don't feel obliged to just ask a question if you would like to make more comments. And the first person on my list is Councillor Simon Smith from Cambridge City. Do we have Simon, please? Are you on mute, Simon? There you go. Still on mute. You need to press that button just once.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's quite apparent there's little public confidence in leaving decisions about bus services in the hands of private operators. How could bus franchising help build public confidence in the GCP's ambition to transform the bus network, service frequency, and operating hours?
Thank you, Simon. Thank you very much indeed for that. Next on my list is Councillor Richard Stobart from South Cambridgeshire District Council. Do we have Richard?
Yes, you do. So my question is concerning funding, and let me read it out. I'll try and be brief. There's no doubt that dramatic improvements to bus services are urgently needed. In many communities, a viable bus service for daily life needs has not existed for many years, forcing reliance on private vehicles. Should that not be affordable or possible for other reasons, drastically curtailing people's independence and making life in these communities unviable? Please could the board set out the range of options that exist for funding the kind of bus improvements envisaged in the current proposals? And then just a second part, if congestion charge revenue is to be relied upon to fund the improved bus services, how can we be sure that those low bus fares, £1 or £2, will continue to make sense in the longer term? And secondly, how can we be confident that revenue will continue to be sufficient to run the necessary level of bus service?
Thank you very much, Richard. We have now got Mairead Healy, Councillor Mairead Healy from Cambridge City. Do we have Mairead?
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me? Yeah?
All good, I think.
Great. So as the Executive Councillor with responsibility for equalities and anti-poverty in the City Council, I want to ask some questions around my remit. So I'm concerned, whilst I'm in support of a drastic reduction in traffic in the city and contributing to helping the climate impact, I am concerned about the disproportionate impact of the proposed changes on those who need to use a car as a lifeline, but who will not be able to afford the congestion charges due to socioeconomic circumstances. And this involves a wide range of scenarios, from patients with long-term conditions who are having intensive treatment requiring frequent attendances at Addenbrooke's, to single parents struggling to survive who don't have the option of putting young children on different buses and getting to work on time in the mornings, and indeed other workers in a range of sectors who are on minimum wages, to name a few. How will we properly ensure that different circumstances are taken into account, with appropriate levels of subsidies being applied where needed? Also, one proposal that I've seen is suggesting that people that will be subject to reimbursements, such as those using Addenbrooke's, would have to claim the money back as a reimbursement afterwards. But the simple reality is that many of these people who are living on the breadline simply don't have the money up front. So how will this be factored in? So some people mightn't be in the position where they can actually claim money back, where they would need not to pay it up front. And I also have similar questions to Cam Cycle around how are we really going to reach out and have an engagement strategy which reaches the most seldom asked people in our society. We all know that with consultations, it's a particular demographic who engage in these consultations. We need to make sure that we're listening and reaching out to people who wouldn't normally engage in these, like single mothers or people from ethnic minority groups or young people. We need to make sure they're all involved, and we are actively reaching out to them and not expecting them just to respond. We need to be making efforts to reach out in the places where they're at. So that would be great if you could clarify that. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mairead, for that. Thank you for joining us. The next person on my list is Cameron, Councillor Cameron Holloway from Cambridge City again. Are you with us? Thank you for joining.
Hi.
I know you made quite an effort to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, my question is along similar lines to Simon's. I've had a number of residents telling me that they're sceptical that the GCP will be able to deliver the planned improvements to bus services. And they've particularly been saying that since we heard about the recent cuts to services made by Stagecoach. So could you just give an update on the steps that are being taken to prepare for the proposed significant expansion of and changes to the local bus network to reassure people that we will actually be able to deliver this?
Thank you very much for that, Cameron. And finally on my list, I have Councillor Patrick Shield from Cambridge City Council. Patrick, are you with us?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Can you hear me?
We can indeed.
Many residents are concerned and upset about the inclusion of Addenbrooke's in the proposed charging scheme, whether that's as patients, including outpatients using community cars, carers, or staff. Can the board explain the rationale behind including the hospital and what measures the GCP is proposing to guard against any disproportionate impact on people who are medically vulnerable, for example, who are immunocompromised and thus needing to avoid shared transport, on low incomes, under extreme stress, or a combination of any of those factors. And as you can see, this is an echo of some of Councillor Healy's concerns. And the other part of my question, or a supplementary question, is, could there also be some thought about the clinically vulnerable and immunocompromised when they make other necessary journeys, but not specifically medical journeys? For example, would the GCP be prepared to consider a discount season ticket or block booking voucher of some kind for this category of person, including, of course, blue badge holders, in order to ensure that they are not disproportionately affected by the proposed changes as a consequence of their frailty, and so as to honour the aspiration to a just transition to a low carbon economy and community?
Thank you very much, Patrick. Thank you so much for coming. And that is the end of the interventions on this item on my list. I would like to thank everyone who spoke for those very pertinent points, which we will now take in turn. And can I invite Isabel to give us some answers, please? Thank you, Isabel.
Well, thank you, Chair. So just taking the first question from Josh Grantham. So if the Executive Board approves the recommendation to undertake a public consultation on the proposal set out in the paper, then this would be wide-ranging to reach as many people as possible across the travel to work area of all ages and across all different demographics. The approach will include comprehensive advertising of the consultation through direct mail, leafleting, social media, as well as traditional media and press, alongside events where people can find out more about the proposals, ask questions and give feedback. The consultation would combine this wide-ranging approach with targeted activity to reach key groups who are likely to be interested in or affected by the proposals, including groups identified in the draft Equality Impact Assessment. And that would include ensuring that students at local schools, post-16 colleges and the universities are all encouraged to participate. Further details of the consultation approach are set out in Appendix A of the report, which followed a request from the Joint Assembly for more information about the consultation to be included in the Executive Board papers. So then taking the question from Councillor Smith. So since the enactment of the 1985 Transport Act, buses in London have operated under a franchise model and they have flourished, while deregulated services elsewhere have generally declined. Franchising would mean that the bus network was publicly managed, with bus services, routes, timetables and fares specified by the local transport authority. And in London, this has led for passengers to a simpler, more integrated approach with easy-to-use, comprehensive network of bus services operating throughout the day at high frequencies. There are lower fares, there's simple multi-operator tickets, and that's supported a growing patronage of the network alongside a growing fleet of electric vehicles that are also helping to improve air quality and the local environment. The decision as to whether to proceed with bus franchising is one for the combined authority, but the evidence from London and research undertaken in Manchester suggests that it would help restore the bus network. Turning then to the question from Councillor Stobart. So the GCP has assessed a range of alternative combinations of charging mechanisms and investment in better bus services and lower fares. The recommended package, which combines improvements to bus services and active travel with a sustainable travel zone, has been tested thoroughly, and not only would it provide the revenues needed to cover public transport costs, but it's also predicted to provide enough revenue to support other aspects of sustainable transport, such as improving active travel facilities as well. In terms of bus fares, fares of £1 and £2 should continue to be attractive given wider cost of living pressures, and fare caps, hopper tickets and other measures would be in place to ensure that taking the bus remains cheaper than driving and parking. Contingencies have been built into the financial modelling to account for things like potential cost inflation of the running of bus services, additional costs for recruiting drivers, all of that sort of thing, as well as different potential scenarios in terms of the number of people paying the charge. And the operation of the scheme would, of course, be monitored to ensure that if any adjustments were needed to be made in the future to avoid a deficit, then that could take place as well. Although, as I said, we're quite confident in terms of the modelling and the revenue generated. The next question from Councillor Healy. So giving more people an affordable, attractive option to travel by public transport will have huge benefits for those on low incomes, as they are much less likely to own a car and currently miss out on opportunities to access employment and education, as well as health services. For people on low incomes who do own a car, this is a much higher proportion of their income than for those on higher incomes. The proposals aim to make it much cheaper for these groups to travel. And of course, Councillor Healy is right that some people will rely on their car for particular journeys or due to their particular circumstances. And so the proposals include a range of discounts, exemptions and reimbursements to mitigate any additional costs. This includes proposals for people accessing health services as well as those on low incomes. The proposal for those on low incomes is that they receive a discount of up to 100% on the charge, and they will not have to pay that upfront. We're working with partners to ensure that applying for the discount, which would kind of last around 12 months and be easy to renew, would be as simple and accessible as possible. And you also asked about how the consultation would reach out to seldom heard groups. So we will be working with kind of local partners, including kind of groups like Citizens Advice and other charities, to make sure that we kind of reach a wide range of people who we don't always hear from as well. Then the next question from Councillor Holloway. So the GCP is working closely with the Combined Authority to respond to the recent stagecoach cuts, and the Mayor announced £1.7 million to keep as many services running as possible. The City Access Package sets out detailed proposals for expanding the bus network, which the consultation will seek feedback on. And alongside this, detailed planning is underway to support the delivery of this network, starting with the priority services that are set out at paragraph 7.7 of the report. The Joint Assembly and the Executive Board have been clear on the need to deliver public transport improvements up front before the introduction of any charging scheme, and £50 million of GCP City Deal funding has been ring-fenced to improve services in advance of any charge should a decision to progress a scheme be taken. The GCP are also supporting the Combined Authority as they explore the potential for franchising the local bus network across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. Franchising could deliver a step change in local bus provision and a London-style system across our geography, supported by the City Access proposals. And the Combined Authority is expected to make a decision on next steps this autumn. Turning then to the question from Councillor Shield. So currently, access to the hospitals can be challenging. For those travelling by public transport, a lack of bus services can make accessing appointments or visiting relatives difficult, if not impossible, particularly out of hours at weekends. Staff at the hospitals consistently raise lack of public transport as a key issue affecting their well-being and employment choices. Travelling by car can also be expensive and stressful, with congestion around the southern part of the city, as well as more widely making journey times unreliable and making people worry that they will miss their appointments or missing them and then having to go back into the system to get one again. Discounts on car parking at the site are limited, and there are tight rules for staff around who can park on site. The Cambridge Biomedical Campus and the wider hospital area is due to grow significantly in the next 5 to 10 years, including the provision of 2 new hospitals. Without massively improving access by bus, walking and cycling to the area, those problems will only worsen. Access to medical care, congestion and air quality will continue to deteriorate. The proposals therefore significantly improve bus provision for the hospitals. The sustainable travel zone would enable the required level of investment to provide a real step change in bus services, benefiting not just those who have no access to a car, but also those who would find it cheaper and easier to travel another way. As Councillor Shield points out, there is a need to ensure that there is not a disproportionate impact on people who need to access the hospital by car, for example, for medical reasons. A range of discounts, exemptions and reimbursements is proposed, and that includes a discount for blue badge holders, whereby they can nominate up to 2 vehicles to receive a 100% discount, and a discount of up to 100% for people on low incomes. During the proposed consultation, we would work with the NHS on the suggested reimbursement schemes for those accessing the hospitals, which include NHS patients clinically assessed as too ill, weak or disabled to travel to an appointment on public transport, including those who have a compromised immune system, require regular therapy or assessments, or need regular surgical intervention. Also, NHS staff using vehicles to carry certain items. That includes things like equipment, controlled drugs, notes, blood, breast milk, that sort of thing. NHS patients accessing accident and emergency services, and NHS and other emergency services staff who are responding to an emergency when they're on call. So that will all be explored as part of the consultation. We're expecting to get kind of lots of feedback on that. Your kind of supplementary question also asked about how we would kind of get to people as part of the consultation as well, in terms of, it asked about clinically vulnerable people making other journeys. So obviously, as I said, blue badge holders would get a discount, but there's an opportunity to kind of explore the impacts of the proposals on kind of other groups more widely and think about kind of different mitigations as part of the consultation as well. Thanks.
Isabel, thank you very much for that. We should introduce the agenda item proper, and there is a report, and I believe we are going to receive a presentation. Isabel, is that you again?
Yes. Here, so there's some slides that are just going to go up. We've got 3 parts to our presentation. I'm going to cover the... So I'm going to cover the proposals, including how these link back to the earlier consultation. I'll then hand over to Alistair, who's our consultant technical lead, and then Peter. But we will do the presentation all in one go and then kind of hand back. So if we could just turn to the first slide. So the proposals form a package that consists of, firstly, a transformed bus network offering cheaper fares, faster, more frequent services, more reliable services, longer operating hours and new routes. Secondly, lower traffic levels enabling improvements to walking and cycling infrastructure and supporting public realm enhancements. And then thirdly, a sustainable travel zone consisting of a road user charge designed to fund the bus and active travel improvements and reduce traffic levels to deliver these, alongside a kind of wider range of outcomes around pollution, emissions, social health and wellbeing outcomes. And the board is being asked to note the feedback from the consultation in 2021 and to agree to a further consultation on that package with those 3 elements. If we could just move to the next slide, please. So before we go through the proposals, this is just a brief reminder of why we have this project. We have discussed the kind of challenges for Greater Cambridge at length in the Executive Board before, but it's important to emphasise the scale of the challenge the area faces, with a significant population growth likely to worsen what is already the second worst congestion in the UK, which would in turn make public transport slower and less reliable. We have high levels of emissions from transport contributing to climate change. In 2020, there are 121 deaths attributable to air pollution. On top of that, we now have a cost of living crisis hitting low-paid workers and families who are much less likely to own a car or will have been most impacted by cost of fuel increases. So we need to find a way to deliver an affordable, attractive and sustainable transport network for our area. Next slide, please. So we've consulted widely on these issues over the last 5 years, including the 2019 Choices for Better Journeys engagement and the Citizens' Assembly, which looked in detail at the options for raising funding for better public transport and active travel and lowering traffic levels to deliver improvements. And these in turn informed the Making Connections consultation that ran last autumn. So kind of a summary of the feedback's on the slide, and it's also detailed in your paper, but it did demonstrate strong support for the aims of the package, as well as for the bus network proposals and the idea of reducing traffic to improve walking, cycling and public spaces. And the findings have been used to inform the proposals, in particular the type and design of the charge zone, as well as how charging income could be spent to improve buses, walking and cycling. Next slide, please. Turning to the first part of the proposals then, the transformed bus network. It's important to emphasise the scale of change we are looking at here. So the network would double in size, benefiting from around 10 times the current levels of investment, and that would be one of the highest in the UK. So taking into account the feedback from the consultation, the proposals focus on improving frequencies and operating hours, providing new routes to increase the coverage of the network and making fares cheaper. The network would cover the whole travel to work area and provide more links into residential and employment areas, faster services and a significant expansion of rural provision. Operating between 5 a.m. and 1 a.m, the aim is to give people confidence to use the bus service for many more journeys. There'll be shorter waiting times with up to 8 buses an hour in Cambridge, up to 6 an hour on key corridors and hourly in rural areas. So that's a big uplift, particularly for places that currently have very limited service or even no service at all. Fares were also key for consultation respondents. So the proposals include a £1 flat fare for the Cambridge area, which is broadly the inner stagecoach fare zone, and a £2 flat fare for the wider travel to work area. So that would offer people significantly cheaper travel with fare caps in place to ensure that daily ticket costs remain lower than current tickets. And kind of as outlined earlier in terms of the answers, we're working closely with the Combined Authority who are considering options around future delivery models for the bus network. And no decisions have yet been taken, but clearly with investment on this scale, the level of control from a franchise system may be attractive. Next slide, please. The second part of the proposal centres on improvements for active travel, as well as support for more people to use sustainable modes. And the GCP is already making significant improvements to walking and cycling infrastructure, but these proposals are an opportunity to go much further. Lower traffic levels and an ongoing investment stream would enable, for example, the completion of the Cycling Plus network, as well as an expansion of the Greenways network. Wider measures suggested include investment in our public spaces, improvements to existing footways and cycleways, an expansion of car clubs, and support for people, particularly equalities groups, to access buses, bicycles, walk, or use mobility aids. Next slide, please. So the third part of the proposals is then the sustainable travel zone, which consists of a road user charge. And the sustainable travel zone is part of this package because it is integral to enabling the first two parts. Detailed work's been undertaken to understand the options for delivering firstly the revenue and secondly the road space that is required for the comprehensive bus, cycling and walking improvements that we need to address the challenges our area faces. The Sustainable Travel Zone proposal takes this work as well as consultation feedback and would consist of a road user charge across the area shown on the slide, and this broadly follows the urban area of the city but excludes the park and ride sites. It would operate 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. on weekdays, and vehicles moving into, out of or within the zone would be charged unless eligible for a discount, exemption or reimbursement. The charge would be £5 per day per cars, with charges for other vehicles as set out in the paper. And Peter will come on to talk about the phasing, but it's just important to emphasise that the bus improvements would be delivered first, with the zone kind of following as part of a slow introduction. Next slide, please. So whilst the focus is on ensuring that many more people can use public transport instead of needing to rely on a car, a key part of the proposals is a suite of discounts, exemptions and reimbursements from the zone charge. These include some vehicles that you kind of expect to see, such as emergency services, but also blue badge holders, people on low incomes, and a package of reimbursements relating to access to medical care and other essential service trips. And kind of getting feedback on the discounts, exemptions and reimbursements would be a key part of the engagement for the proposed consultation. So I'll now just turn to Alistair to continue and talk through the benefits and impacts of the proposals.
Thank you, Isabel. Next slide, please. And again, thank you. So on this slide here, we've got the overall headline impacts of the scheme, assuming it's in place alongside all the public transport improvements. What we're trying to show on here on the left-hand side is really that in terms of what you're aiming to achieve, it is doing all the things you're setting out to do in terms of the traffic reduction, critically that funding to support the transformation of the bus network, to support walking and cycling, and wider mobility. In terms of some of the numbers on the right, really these are truly transformational in terms of the impact. Often we talk about transformation in sort of projects, but I've been working in transport for over 25 years, and we're normally talking about single-figure reductions of car reduction or single-figure reduction of public transport increase across cities. The numbers on here are pretty phenomenal. And I think what they're showing you really is the difference you can make if you have that combination of the sustainable travel zone and a sustained funding income to make that change to the bus network, so they run early in the morning, late at night, so they run for the fares you think are right. And if you look outside London, over the last decade, we've seen declining bus use continuing, and pretty much since deregulation, just a slight blip in the early noughties. So this is it shows if you can put the right measures in place, you can turn that decline in bus use on its head and really start to make a difference, provide a bus network that is there for what people need, when they need it, for the hours they need it, for the fares they need. But it's not just about buses. We're showing on there a substantial increase in active travel, people walking and cycling. And that's really important for the short journeys they can make, particularly in the urban environment. And that delivers benefits in terms of, obviously, the decongestion, but critically wider health benefits to those people. And there's a lot of research around the power of the pedestrian pounds. The more people we can get actively moving around our areas, the more they're going to spend as well, again, with local and economic impacts. And critically, this level of traffic reduction also supports wider placemaking aspirations. So the City Council's supplementary planning document about making spaces for people, it creates that space so you can start to have more ambitious public realm, more ambitious re-engineering of our cities to make them people-focused and not car-focused, which is critical, again, to the long-term transformation and growth. Next slide, please. I'll turn into impacts, which is a very important part. So as part of the work, we've undertaken a range of impact assessments, shown on the slide, across equalities, social, distributional, air quality, noise, carbon, and health. And these are really important in terms of an iterative process. So we look at what we think the conditions are now and what the scheme might do, and we look at how we can adapt and evolve the proposal to really make the maximum positive impacts and certainly to mitigate any adverse impacts. As a whole, across these impacts, we're seeing the conclusion that they're broadly positive or neutral. Taking air quality, noise, carbon, and health as a group, those are broadly consistent in terms of how they're assessing the impacts, principally because there's such a big reduction in traffic and a large increase in active travel critically, but also bus use, that we're seeing actually a positive impact across those assessments. And then in terms of the air quality particularly, the way the charges have been set out is we are locking in additional measures to try and encourage the buses, the LGVs and taxis, which are identified as being the major cause of pollutants. So for the charging, the proposed charges, we're setting those in a way to encourage those to move to zero emission vehicles. So it's getting you extra air quality benefits as part of the measures. We are aware there may be some localised issues in terms of air quality, particularly with traffic rerouting, and those will be looked at carefully as part of the next stage should it go forward. In terms of the equalities impact assessment, which is a very important part of the process, again, that's showing the benefits are shared by protected characteristic groups and by low-income groups, and overall across the equalities impact in the social distribution impact assessment, it shows there are many benefits in terms of reduced accidents, increased physical activity, improvements to personal affordability, particularly public transport, improved security, noise reduction and user benefits. And these benefits are largely experienced by vulnerable groups, in particular children, women and elderly people. The EQI does flag some potential adverse impacts, and it's important we do recognise those and consider those carefully. Public transport and the hours when the zone isn't in operation provide some opportunity for people to make journeys who these impacts are felt on. And for those who do need to drive, the range of discounts, exemptions and reimbursements are seen to be likely to mitigate those impacts. However, it does flag in the report there are still groups which have concerns, and we recognise this as a significant proposition. So through the consultation and through any further development of the scheme, we would look to further explore, understand and mitigate any issues that people identify. The final thing on equalities I think is really worth stressing is that we often talk about mitigation inequalities, but with this income stream that the scheme brings you, there's also an opportunity to really look for positive actions and enhancements in terms of equalities issues. And these can often be small amounts of money but have a big impact, such as working with people who have, say, barriers to using public transport, a group with learning difficulties. You could have information, training for drivers, way marking from bus stops to centres and so on. So I think if it goes forward, then certainly taking the opportunity with the income it generates, also look at positive actions, and I can really do as much as you possibly can would be a strong recommendation. Next slide. So in conclusion on the benefits and impacts, really this scheme is giving a significant range of benefits across access to employment, education, leisure, etc. And particularly for those on low incomes or without access to a car. It's really doing what it needs to do in terms of the traffic reduction and carbon reduction, and it's giving greater health benefits through active travel and air quality. It's not important to stress enough, really, the stable and continued funding for an attractive bus network is fundamental to this. And, you know, some of the shocks we're seeing at the moment with deregistration of services potentially is because you haven't got that certainty and we're in this deregulated market. So having a certain income to give you that service you want when you want it for the price you want is fundamental. And as I said, we need to do further engagement throughout the proposed consultation to really drill down and understand where there are concerns, where there are potential negative impacts, to understand those in more detail with the people who are concerned about them, to really understand how we can look at mitigating those further if it goes forward.
Next slide, please. So every time you as a board and joint assembly have considered this agenda, you've made absolutely clear that the public transport improvements need to come first. So that slide outlines an indicative timeline that says the authorities, the county council, may well be in a position in the middle of next year to take a decision on this. And if that was the case, then what we could see is bus improvements from the end of 2023. So probably starting with significant reductions in fares, because actually it's the easiest thing to deliver. But then a considerable ramping up over a period of time in terms of those improvements that we've spoken about in terms of operating hours, geographic coverage, types of vehicles, you know, looking at electric vehicles rather than more diesel vehicles, and then those significant enhancements over a period of years. At the moment, there's a proposal for a £5 charge from 27 or 28. So what that timeline identifies is 3 or 4 years improvements in public transport prior to any charge. And again, this will be part of the consultation and we would welcome people's views on it. Certainly that reflects some of the conversations we've had when we've considered this agenda previously. Next slide, please. So delivering the bus measures are vitally important to doing this, which is why we are in close working relationships with the combined authority, which is why we're speaking to bus operators to ensure that we offer the necessary confidence that these things will happen, that our proposal truly develops the transformational bus network that we want, and that we have an implementable, credible plan over those 3 or 4 years that demonstrates improvements over that period of time. Consultation, so this has been a number of questioners have already asked this. Isabel's outlined, there's far more information in the appendices on this. But obviously, the consultation is going to be key to this. We are not going to hide our light under a bushel. We're going to make sure that we are out there, that we are talking to all of the groups that have been raised and more, to make sure that we are bringing the package for people's considerations, and they make decisions based on the package. Maybe not just one element of it that they happen to like or they happen to dislike. Isabel's outlined it previously in terms of that information's been available, and I'm sure we will continue to talk about it as we go through the next few months if you decide to take this decision. Next slide, please. So this is the final slide, and this is again the indicative timeline that you've seen before. So the decision today is a decision to consult. It's not a final decision. Consultation would take place from the middle of October. We would then clearly be having garnished people's views, pulling together, understanding that, reviewing it, analysing that, and then bringing that back to you in the new year for your further considerations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Isabel, Alistair and Peter. Thank you so much for those slides. Before we start the debate, we have to hear from Councillor Bick. Welcome, Councillor Bick. Thank you so much for your report as usual. What did the Assembly have to say about this item when you discussed it?
Thanks, Chair. Yes, the Assembly met on the 8th of September. We had a long session discussing this agenda item. And I think the the first point to make is that we understood that we were not being asked whether this scheme should be implemented. We were being asked about whether this scheme was right to consult on. So we didn't regard this as a consultation itself, but the necessary considerations preparatory to that taking place. And the first part of that, I think, was to ask ourselves whether this was a logical package in terms of the sequence of work that has been ongoing to go forward with to the public. And there was a near unanimous consensus that the proposed package was a logical progression from all the work that has been done. The 4 successive phases of talking to the public, including through the Citizens' Assembly, which was a much more in-depth process than a traditional consultation process. And that and of course also the technical work that has followed each of those stages to enable options to be considered and deliverability to be assessed. So we also felt that they were proper, that the scheme as has been drafted was properly designed in a way which addressed the goals that we had originally set for it in terms of improving public transport and active travel, tackling congestion, greenhouse gas emissions and pollution in Cambridge. So we felt that this scheme was right to talk to the public about, and there was a near unanimous consensus on near unanimous consensus on that in the Assembly. So the next aspect of our process is really then to look at the consultation process, and obviously by the way the process unfolds in the public environment, it's the public awareness first is a report in one of these packs, which I think was published in late August, and obviously people start talking and expressing views about that, but that actually is before the consultation process has started. But I think we felt that through the views expressed in the Assembly, including the many public questions that we had, it was quite a useful period to help us encapsulate what it is that the consultation is going to need to address to be effective. And so we made a number of points to the board about things that we think that the consultation needs to satisfy. We felt that that there needs to be good referencing to the current problems that we're trying to fix, and a narrative along with that, which explains what would be the consequences to those problems of doing nothing at all, like this package is intending. Secondly, and that this echoes some of the points that were made in the contributions earlier, that the really high priority there is on ensuring that there is effective engagement with disadvantaged and marginalised groups. And that includes, and that means people living both within and beyond the proposed charging zone, people who will be effectively using the charging zone to travel through. We also felt, and strongly based on some of the comments made in public questions to us and general public comment that we had read, that the relevant comparison here that we need to establish through the consultation is not between public transport as it currently is and a disincentive to use a private car instead. This is a package which transforms the public transport offering, and the comparison that we should be seeking to encourage people to evaluate is the one of the public transport system we would be creating against use of the car ongoing. We also felt allied with that it was really important to enable people to look at their personal journeys through what we put out there in this consultation process, because for most people this package is not an ideological matter, it's a pragmatic matter about what fits into their lives. And so we are asking that the board satisfies itself that there is going to be a personalised journey planner which enables people to sort of size up what is being offered and see how practical that alternative is for them when giving their views. We also had exposure to the discussion about the inclusion of the Addenbrooke site in the proposed charge zone. We benefited from having the director of the biomedical campus as an assembly member in holding that discussion. And our belief was that this is a question with two sides to it, and it's not one that ought to be embarked upon without informing ourselves fully of that, and that the consultation process is the right way of doing that, and we need to then look at what we're told and evaluate that in terms of our broader objectives. And so appropriate that we go forward with that element, but be sure that we do get the feedback from that process, which enables us to assess it afterwards. And the bottom line then on the consultation process was that we were looking for the board to be presented with a clearer statement of its consultation process than we had been given. I mean, there was some discussion about in our paperwork about the consultation process, but there wasn't a clear policy statement about how that would be and what it would look like. And that was a request that we made, and we're pleased to see that that has been appended to your report, which is a positive development. So those were our comments. We thought this was a package that we should go ahead and consult on with those provisos, and we very much look forward to hearing what people have to say so that we can help shape this further. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tim, for that very helpful introduction. I'm going to open the debate with the board now. Before I do that, I know that Councillor Bick, when I watched your debate, it was structured in a particular way. I don't intend to structure this debate in the same way because there's so much fewer of us. But the main things that we will talk through are what are the proposals. So there is a new bus network to be introduced, a sustainable travel zone, and how these have been shaped by previous consultations. What are the impacts? What does our equalities assessment tell us, and what are we proposing to do about it? And what is the process going to be? So what is the phasing that we propose? What is the type of delivery that we propose? And how is the consultation going to work? Including addressing concerns, of which we have had many, around deliverability. Are we going to be able to do what we're saying we would do, should the consultation have a positive outcome? So those, I would just like you to bear those in mind as the areas that we will talk about. It is now for members of the board to say something about what they have heard so far. Do we have anyone who would like to open the debate? Please, Brian.
Fascinating discussion today, and very pleased to see from Isabel's report particularly some of those additional details that reflect many of the concerns that we've heard on social media and elsewhere as a reaction to the proposal to go to consultation, with many of its misconceptions. Well, an example of which is that all the park and rides should be removed from the congestion zone. As we know, they were never in there. but the map has been looked at in not enough detail, and they've assumed that some of the park and rides, if not all of them, are in the congestion zone. Clearly, that wouldn't be a sensible thing to do with the proposals that we've got before us. So I think that the misinformation or even disinformation from some of the people who are opposing the scheme needs to be answered. And I'm pleased that the consultation exercise seeks to do that. I think the impact of Stagecoach's deregistration of many routes and reformulation of others is a disastrous intervention at this time, and I can't speak lowly of it enough. You know, we're going to go backwards at a time when we want to accelerate our provision of bus services, and that is hugely disappointing as an absolute minimum, because we want behavioural change, and we see from the stage process that we're talking about here that we want to encourage people to use public transport ahead of the charging that it will provision. And we should make sure that the linkage between the low bus fares, additional services, and the funding that GCP are proposing in making to make those changes and make them available before the introduction of the road charging scheme, that in the long term will pay for the scheme's longevity. You know, we've seen from Isabel's report a 20-hour-a-day bus service. So 5 a.m. to 1 a.m. on key routes. You know, there's attractive options. And actually, as part of those conversations that I've had, people are actually quite keen on using public transport if it's available, if it's reliable, if it's robust. They're quite happy with that in principle. But we need to make sure that they have the confidence that we can deliver what the proposals are suggesting. So I look forward to that. There are questions over bus franchising that have come out today, and I'm pleased to see Nick Johnson is here to hear that. And I'd like to see that sooner rather than later. So anything anybody can do to encourage that, I'd be very pleased to see. We are in economic uncertain times at the moment. And I know we've talked about the impact of inflation on any of these proposals. So that has to be taken into account. Lots of questions over how we will make either exemptions or discounts. So, you know, will we give universal benefit claimants automatic discount? But we have to understand, you know, where's the linkage? Where's the information going to come from that? Can we do it automatically? But then, do they have a car anyway? Because we, as somebody mentioned, 20 to 30% of our residents don't have cars. One minor thing on a sort of personal, I'm the lead member for licensing, and if you only make licensing or licensed Cambridge City cabs a problem, then there's going to be probably 960 cab drivers in South Cambs that will want to migrate their registration to the city. One last point I'd like to make is that it's important that the population that are being asked to comment in this consultation believe and see it to be not a tick box exercise. And I was pleased with to see some of the early drafts of the consultation that gives them free form answer capability, so that we can cover both the people that want to spend 10 or 15 minutes responding to it, or the people that want to spend 10 or 15 hours responding to it can equally be heard. And then we can garner the widest possible consultation and engagement, is the word I'm searching for, as that we could possibly can.
Thank you, Brian. Before we carry on, I just wanted to say, I've seen a few people at the back sort of shuffling on what look like really small seats. If you're struggling, please feel free to access more comfy seats. Absolutely. I've been meaning to say this for half an hour. I'm really sorry. But anyway, thank you, Brian. Thank you, Brian, for this. Anyone else, please? Right, shall we do this so I remember to call everybody? Andy.
Thank you, Chair. And there's so much to go into. I think we're going to have to dip in and come back, hopefully, so we get more than one shot at this. But I think I have to start with thanking the officers. I think we often thank the officers when they produce papers. But this has been a Herculean task, and I suspect it's been going on for many years. And I suspect it's become more than a job, and it's become a mission almost to get this out. And as Brian was saying, there's so much in here, so much to discuss. And one of the reasons that it has been very well thought through. We're often accused of not thinking things through properly, but this is certainly a case where there is an awful lot of detail. And wherever we get to with the next phase, I think I would suggest people read the consultation papers very, very carefully, because there's an awful lot in there and an awful lot we can get out of it. So I'd start by saying, having seen the feedback over the years, this has been going on a long time, I would say what's been put forward to us by officers does reflect the feedback of the consultations, particularly that of the Citizens' Assembly. So I think it is a reasonable reflection of the feedback we've had so far. I'll start with a different place. The one thing you didn't mention in the things we had to cover is demand. Because another question we get is actually, is this needed? Is the demand still there post-COVID, potential lack of growth through various initiatives that are going on at the moment? So we have the recent ONS data came out, which showed that Cambridge City is the fastest growing city in the country, and that the growth of jobs is not far behind. And as we've been saying for many years in business, the growth of jobs is exceeding that which is planned, partly because business haven't been good enough at telling local authorities when they've been growing. We've got better at that, but there's still a disconnect, and the growth is happening faster than we think. Now, that's not a bad thing. Growth of jobs in the Cambridge area are generally highly productive jobs, and so contribute massively to the local, but particularly the national economy. So that's a good thing. We also now have a new government that stated their priorities, I've written this down, is growth times 3. So the new government say it's growth, it's growth, it's growth. And I think it would be naive to assume that none of that additional growth will come into this area. And again, that's not necessarily a bad thing. The challenge we've had is the infrastructure has not been able to catch up with that jobs growth, and we need to be able to do that in the future. And then finally, in changing work patterns, and actually one of the places we've modelled that quite early on. So as a result of COVID, are people going to stay at home? How's it all going to pan out? So we've got the CBC travel study, which is buried away down in page 140-something, Appendix 9. And assumptions have been made by that working with the hospitals. And they think around 10% of employees will now work from home, which is different, and it's a different number, and it just changed the demand. Despite that, the CBC travel transport study suggests there'll be a shortfall of 4,600 trips per day with the current provision and the expected provision with the South West Travel Hub, Cambridge South Station, and the CSET scheme. And as you can just nod, Peter, presumably the reduction in bus services now proposed by Stagecoach will make that deficit even greater. So put 4,600 trips into, this isn't just a theoretical concern, that's 4,600 more cars having to come onto the campus because there's no alternative. So that's gridlock. That's gridlock for people coming into hospital to get treated. That's gridlock for productivity for businesses based on the campus. And it's a nightmare for the residents of Queen Edith and Trumpington who have cars basically gridlocked in their streets. So these aren't sort of theoretical concerns. And that's with all the measures we're planning. So CSET, Cambridge South Station, South West Travel Hub, still not enough. One question I'll have back to Peter is, with these new measures, will that deal with that 4,600 trip deficit? Or have we got even more to come? We really need to get a feel for quite trip. And I like some metrics about how is this what we need? So to come on the transport system itself, we've been looking at that for quite a while now. So we have a sort of spine of segregated routes coming in, so additional network of regional and local bus services, and then we have a series of park and rides connected to the strategic road network to capture those who actually can't use the rural bus network, for some reason don't go on the segregated routes, so you can at least get to a park and ride and you get in as well. And the question really is, do we think that will be enough for people to switch to the bus? That's what it comes down to, and I've been asked that question many times as a business leader. What I've repeated many times in these meetings is employees will use a park and ride, mainly because they're quite close to Cambridge and you can just get a bus in and they're quite regular and they're quite fast. They will use segregated bus routes. We've got evidence of that. They don't use non-segregated bus routes, so that's not great for us. And so will they use these? I think it's in the middle. I think there were suggestions we should be less ambitious. Just stick some bus lanes on the roads and that will sort things out. No, it won't. That's not going to create behaviour change. And then we have more ambitious plans. We have the Cam Metro, which is the rubber-wheeled solution proposed by the Combined Authority. Didn't get any central government funding. As an organisation, we were in government asking why that was, and it didn't come through the Transforming Cities Fund. And we have even more ambitious things like Cambridge Connect. I don't want to go down a rabbit hole, but we're not precluding those in the future. We have segregated routes. We had to demonstrate quite painfully that they would adapt to CAM routes if necessary. But we can't wait 5, 10, 15 years for a solution. We can't wait for central government to come up with the money. I'm very happy to go into discussions with government on how we can release more of the £1 billion a year that Cambridge contributes to the national economy to bring it back into the local area. But that's not going to happen in any time frame shortly. So I would say this bus network with its park and rides, segregated solutions, rural network, probably will be enough if you can reduce the congestion within Cambridge. But what we don't know is the individual feedback. We need to know from real people what this means for them. What buses have we proposed? How is it going to work for them? What are their individual stories? There are bound to be gaps. However good a job the officers did, they cannot reflect the fact we've got 200,000 or 300,000 people in the area, and we need them to really engage in this and says, what do you need? What bus routes do you need? What's your personal circumstances? What will drive you to change from what you're doing now to a more sustainable solution? In terms of funding, we know that to reduce the congestion and fund it, dramatically improve the bus services, we need that congestion charge in place. We know a congestion charge disproportionately disadvantages low-income families who have no choice other than the car, but it disproportionately advantages low-income families who don't have a car. And so we need to, again, during the consultation, really try to understand those different groups. What are the pros, what are the cons, who are the winners and who are the losers, and make sure that the losers aren't disproportionate losers, and make sure the winners are win as far as possible. I think that's a reasonable thing to do. And again, we need to go into consultation to get to those things. I'm nearly finished. I might not need to come back a second time. I was just going to reflect on what happened at the Assembly, and actually particularly in relation to the hospitals. We often hear that the GCP doesn't come under sufficient scrutiny, there isn't sufficient debate. Goodness me, Tim, that Assembly meeting. I couldn't listen to it live, so I listened to the recording. Many, many hours of debate, and actually strongly held views on different sides. And we heard from different members during that debate about the challenges of having Addenbrooks within the charge. You know, one member was talking about the absolute nightmare of having a premature child and having to go backwards and forwards to the hospital all the time, and how that would have been impossible in the absence of having a car. But then also we heard from an Assembly member who gave birth in their car because they couldn't get to the hospital because of the congestion, and patients within A&E who had to make a choice between staying to have their treatments or going home because their last bus had already gone. Of course, in the future, that bus doesn't exist at the moment because Stagecoach have probably withdrawn it. So there are things we really need to do. And I think really what I want to know is actually, we're all emotionally attached to our hospitals, but have we actually talked to the representatives of the hospitals and what they think? A lot of people want to say what the hospitals should and shouldn't be doing. Perhaps we should be talking to the representatives of the hospitals and finding out what their views are, because they're probably the experts on what's required for healthcare outcomes. Finding out 120 deaths a year, that's not a great news if you're a hospital. Another 4,600 trips coming into the hospital means it's going to be congested all the time. So what are we going to do about that? I'm not saying I have the answers, but we need to go into that consultation to figure out what we're going to do there. And then I'll finally come on to the sustainability and climate change. So both local authorities and business have very ambitious carbon zero sustainability targets. A lot of the local authorities want to be net carbon zero by 2040, 2050, a lot of businesses by 25, 2030. And one of the big challenges for businesses, I imagine same local authorities, it's always them. They need to do something. Our business needs to do more. Eventually, the university as well. What are the businesses doing about getting to net carbon zero? But the reality is it becomes a personal issue. What are you going to do about sustainability? What are you going to do about reducing your carbon footprint? And this is big change for people. This is actually saying to people, instead of using a car, you're going to use something else. It's going to have to change your behavior. I hear a lot of conversations of arguing why I still need to use my car. I'd like to hear a lot more conversations about what do I need to make me switch to a sustainable transport solution. And I think we have the chance now. We have the opportunity, we have the money, we have the funding, we have a strategy. We need the people to tell us what do they really want out of this. Are they prepared for change? Is Cambridge prepared? It's nice to see Josh here, very consistent from Camp Cycle campaign, whether you agree or disagree with them. Is Cambridge ready for that change? Are we going to become a sustainable city? Are we going to become a sustainable area? What are the compromises? How are we going to do that?
Thank you very much, Andy, for that. And is Cambridge ready? That is the question. Is Cambridgeshire ready? This is a big, are we all collectively ready to transform the travel to work area? And I'd like to just pick up a point you made about Addenbrooke's, because Addenbrooke's is, references something Patrick Shield said earlier. It is important to consider the role of Addenbrooke's. Addenbrooke's is going to be a major destination. I mean, it is already a major destination and it's horrendously underserved. It needs to be a major destination. Everyone's going to be able to get to Addenbrooke's much, much better than they do at the moment. And everyone has to access it fairly, because accessibility to Addenbrooke's need to be from all over the place. It's not just Cambridge City residents that go to Addenbrooke's, it's South Cambs residents that go to Addenbrooke's. We can't forget the principle of fairness of access to Addenbrooke's and what that means in terms of, is it in the zone, is it not in the zone? That's what the consultation's about, but let's forget the area. Let's not forget the area it serves. We're just getting started. Anyone else would like to speak? Andy, number 2, just because you're coming second, but by no means second.
Thank you. So I won't spend ages. I mean, 2 or 3 points I want to make. The first is just to echo what the other Andy said. I mean, I think the work that the officers have done in terms of pulling this material together, thinking about how the consultation should work and so on, or could work, incredibly impressive. And I think it's really crucial that if we end up going into consultation on this, that people really do look at the rounded package of measures. There's a danger that people pick up on 1 or 2 issues and just focus on that, and you can see that a little bit in social media already. Now, clearly that's incumbent on us then to make sure that if we were to go to consultation, we present the materials in a way which allows people to digest them quickly, understand what's going on, and understand what the issues are. So that's the first thing. Thank you to the officers, and then thinking quite carefully about the consultation. The second thing is, I think that a number of comments that have been made today, and indeed have been made in advance, the discussion at the Assembly, do raise real questions. And this has to be a conversation between the people who've been developing this scheme and what the community at large want. And I think it's really crucial then, is the point that Josh made right at the start. It really is the community at large. We've got to think very carefully about how do we engage people from all sorts of walks of life who wouldn't normally in a conversation like this. How do we elicit their views? Because otherwise we'll get a minority view that ends up swaying the conversation, and that's not right for the longer term. The third thing I'd say is I think in actually getting out to that wider group of people, for me a fundamental group is the next generation. It's really important that the people who are going to have to live with the consequences of these decisions over a long time period think about what future they want in Cambridge and how it will work for them in the future. And so reaching out to those wider communities is crucial. The final piece I was just going to comment on was, I think, from is making sure that any consultation we do really is as much as possible a two-way conversation. There will be questions that come up during the consultation process that actually, by responding to them, whether that's interactively on website or whatever, will actually shape the conversation on an ongoing basis. And so thinking about how do we make this not just a consultation, but actually a conversation, I think we'll get to a much better outcome for everybody.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you very much. Anyone else? Dave?
Thanks. I'm going to stand up because I've been sitting down too long. The discussion and the proposals for city access has been building in this city and the surrounding area for a long, long time now. In key questions that politicians have been asked. But not only politicians. These are questions that are discussed around dinner tables, in the pub. At any time when a group meets, and you'll all find them very familiar. So what are these questions? People are saying we need more reliable buses. We need more of them. We need them to be cheaper so that everybody can use them. We need to reduce the amount of cars and vehicles that are coming into the city of Cambridge. 100,000 vehicle movements a day. It's almost inconceivable. It's almost, you can't understand it. How can 100,000 vehicles move around this small patch of land every day? The concerns about climate change and pollution. Globally, we're in trouble. And locally, we need to play our part. Cambridge is a lead city in this country. It's a centre of excellence for education, for biotech. It is a centre of excellence. There's more people in Cambridge got patents than anywhere else in the country. I've been spending a lot of time on social media this month. I've been taking quite a hammering, a bit of controversy, but I've been trying to go out there and actually answer people's questions. I've been trying to hear what people are saying. And I recognise that many people are unaware of so many things, that people raise things and they hang on to them and they don't trust us. Now, I know that politicians are not the world's favourite people, but it's politicians that actually run this country, but only with the permission of the people that we represent. And as Andy said, are we ready to actually bring about the changes that we have been asking for, that everybody is asking for? So I've got a few questions that perhaps the officers might pick up. Who controls and provides the buses? Who actually controls and provides the buses at this moment in time? Can you explain how the bus system operates in Cambridge? Can you tell us what does Stagecoach do and who do they do it for? How would franchising change that? How would it be different if the buses were franchised? We lack credibility of the scheme. Why would the GCP succeed with a process that's failed in this city at this moment? It's failing, disastrously failing. People will not be able to get to work. People will not be able to earn money. So how will the GCP be different? Why are we having a consultation and not a straightforward vote? Some people think that there should just be a vote. We should all put our hands up in some way, and then we go yes or no, you've got it or you haven't got it. Is this a money-making scheme for the councils? A lot of people actually think, and I don't blame them at all. A lot of people actually think this is a way of Cambridge City and Cambridge County and South Cambs of subsidising their higher standard of living, the way that they're living in the city or the county, and the provisions of their services. And finally, one of the things that are being asked is there is a very real concern about people who are financially challenged, who have disabilities, who can't move around like everybody else, people that are ill, people that have a responsibility to care for others. So maybe the officers could just comment on a few of those points to underwrite it so that in the month or so that comes, if we approve this package today, we can point to bits on the video and say, there's the answer to that question. It was said in public. People are accountable for those answers. So I'm going to sit down now before my seat gets cold.
Thank you, Dave. And that probably isn't a bad point for me to say. Does anyone would like to, sorry, I can do English grammar, I promise. Would anyone like to input into the board discussion that we've had so far. Would you like to go on, Isabel?
Yeah, I'll probably pick some of them up and then ask Peter probably just say a bit more about buses, if that's all right. But just in terms of kind of the point around sort of consultation and why not just a vote, I think there's a couple of things to say there. First of all, you know, the aim is very much for this to be meaningful, as kind of the discussions picked up a lot. You know, there are serious consequences to doing nothing, and there's kind of quite a complex package of proposals here with different elements in it, and it, you know, allowing people the opportunity to shape those as well as to comment on them is really important. There's also a kind of statutory reason, which is that you know, in order to introduce a road user charging scheme, you have to run a consultation and you have to ask people about things like the boundary, the charge levels, the exemptions, etc. The point around kind of raising money to fund the councils is also kind of a legal point as well, in that the legislation that governs kind of charging schemes is very clear that you can only spend the income raised on kind of the achievement of your transport policies, your transport proposals. So that's kind of where the money would go, and kind of, as we've set out, primarily into the bus network. And, you know, if the scheme did go forward, the county councillors, the charging authority, would have to set out every year what it plans to spend the money on. In terms of kind of the concerns around, you know, people who could be disproportionately impacted around this, around low income, disabled, things like that. We've talked quite a lot about the exemption discounts. I think the consultation is a real opportunity to reach these people and kind of discuss in detail how these things might work, whether it's going to be kind of adequate for them, whether we need to make changes to it, whether there are other things that we need to consider as well. So I think that's you know, a key part of that as well. Just one other quick point, which was kind of part of Brian's thing around taxis, was that, just to clarify, that the proposal isn't only to discount the city council taxis. It is just to have a regime based on their licensing arrangements, applying equally to anyone wherever they're registered as well. So yeah, and Peter wants to pick up buses.
Thank you, Chair. So, just in terms of Andy Williams's question on the CBC travel survey, this package would address that shortfall in terms of the 4,600 journeys. So that would be dealt with if a package of this nature was progressed. In terms of bus services outside of London and soon to be Manchester are deregulated. So they're run by private operators with a view to commercial gain. The decisions on the routes, the timetables, the fares are a decision for the operators themselves, and hence we've seen recent decisions around Stagecoach and the sort of services they've decided they want to provide in this area. Franchising is available as an option for certain areas. This is a decision in our geography for the Mayor and the Combined Authority to take a view on. The London experience, which is the one that's been going for a long time, has demonstrated that public control of fares, frequencies, services, timetables has offered a series of significant benefits. As Isabel said earlier on, it's the only area of the country where patronage has grown over the last 20 years in terms of making sure there's an integrated offer that meets public service requirements rather than for commercial bus operators, but I'm sure that others may want to come in further. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you very much. Just another in-between comment from me. I do apologise for my cough. I am an asthmatic and I am stress coughing. I promise it's nothing more sinister than that. Another thing I've been meaning to say for a while. There is a point I need to pick up from what Dave just said before I bring in Brian. There is an enormous amount of lack of trust in the deliverability of what we are promising. Again, should the consultation go out and come back positive, that's always. We have got a real job persuading people to trust us that we're not promising things that we know are undeliverable. This is extremely important, and I've been racking my brain, I've been thinking about this thing. How do I convince somebody. You know, I've had email exchanges with people, like back and forth, 5 or 6 times. No, but this is the plan. No, but this is what we're planning. No, but, you know, I finish my shift at 9 p.m. I can't come back with the bus. No, we were planning buses until 1 a.m. No, but I don't believe that. And that is really hard. And it's really hard because politicians have failed so many times in the past. But I have thought about that, and I think there is absolutely no other way for us to try to repair some damage, some of this terrible damage that has been done to public trust in politicians over the last decade or so, certainly recently. Start doing what we promise. Really start doing what we promise. And, you know, this is going to need to be absolutely central to when we go out and talk to people. And going out and talking to people directly is really, really important. When people engage with me personally, they get off, oh, you know, you listened to me, I had a question, you answered. I mean, we have to do that. We have to do that, and we have to do it to such a scale. Thank you, Dave, for those points. Brian, would you like to come back?
Thanks. I think your comments about trust in politics is echoing some of the concerns I was also expressing earlier. You know, we had a Boris Johnson Bus Back Better scheme, which was originally promised £3 billion, which was slashed in half by the Treasury. Does nothing. I mean, let's forget his interview where he had model buses. Do you remember that? Yeah. So it's absolutely critical that we get this behavioural change, and I was delighted to see that many people had arrived here by means other than their cars, and at least 3 out of the 5 members of the board have done that today. So that's the sort of change that we need, because I wouldn't have done that before, and I feel obliged to be walking my talk if I'm encouraging other people to get on their bikes. The other, briefly, I note that Stagecoach and Greater Manchester had to go to court before they got an agreement.
Establishment, isn't that important? Nick, would you like to address us?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Alicia. I will be relatively short here because I am a member of the board, but I'm a non-voting member. I think I just want to acknowledge the huge amount of work that has been done by the officers of the GCP, and very importantly, the huge amount of collaboration that has been done with the officers of the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Combined Authority. I'm sure that the fact that we've been able to move on to such an impressive document, the proposal for a consultation that is well based on evidence, has been well researched, you know, there's been a lot of feedback from people before it's put before us, has helped because there is a nature and a desire to work between the two organisations. But I also like to think there's an example that people are more willing to work across parties, political parties, because we realise the seriousness of the challenges we are confronted with. In the last week, I have had more emails than I care to mention, and I'm not somebody who easily is affected by stuff that comes into the inbox, because you know you hear stories all the time, but when people are writing very emotive stories about how their lives will be affected by a loss of a bus route and the importance of how public transport is within the lives of their children, their neighbours, their residents, it reinforced in me the absolute necessity to take on the broken system that has come from bus deregulation since the 1980s. I'm sure somebody thought it was a good idea at the time. But the fact is, as has been mentioned several times, the one place in the country where it didn't happen is an area that thrives and has grown in terms of its public transport. That's London. Now, I look at the time when I lived in London and the idea of connectivity, the use of Oyster cards, the way people could get about, the way it actually brought the City of London together, the community of London. It was something that people were proud of. Hell, we sell red buses. You know, it's a vision of what's great about the United Kingdom. Well, I'm not saying we should have a specific colour for Cambridgeshire, but in the long term, the idea that bus franchising may well deliver for all of us, not just Cambridge City and the greater Cambridge area, but for the whole of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, is one that I would welcome. I don't want to say too much because, as you say, people push back against it. Andy, as I'm allowed to call him now, Andy Burnham, the Mayor for Greater Manchester, he was challenged, and it's often seen as we want to keep the status quo. But I am not going to stand here, and I certainly within my own organisation will work with all, across all political parties, all of the community to make sure that we do deliver improvements in the bus services. And if this consultation gives us a route map towards one of those achievements, then for me, it's good that it's going out to the public, and I would encourage all of those people who wrote to me explaining how important the buses were for them in terms of recent route cancellation announcements, which I am delighted to say we are pushing back against, and we will continue that positioning. Please keep writing to me. I want to know how this is important to you, and indeed all of that correspondence will be passed on to the consultation to make sure that they are realising how important now 5 years of improvement in bus services is a price worth paying if in the end we have a sustainable travel zone. I won't then go on to the other benefits as a children's doctor about knowing that when my wife, who works at Adam Brooks Hospital, and for the record has already said, well, if it's the price that we have to pay for me to get to work, then she's willing to accept it. The fact is, far too many times you can look at the postcodes of the children who are presenting to hospitals. You can tell that they're going to be affected. Their asthma will be affected because they've got poor air quality. We have to do things about congestion. We have to improve air quality, and we have to take this consultation forward to get the solution. But we will do it by listening and responding and having that conversation. So thank you again for the officers for all the work you've done. I will make sure that the officers of the Combined Authority continue to work consistently with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Mayor. Is there any other point that we would like to make? In which case, oh, Dave, come on. Oh, come on, I mean, please do address us.
Slightly shorter this time, I think. I want to talk just a bit about vision. This area is expanding. 30,000 new homes within the next decade. 60,000 new people, potentially without buses, which are failing currently and will fail even more if they are not run by the GCP and by a new franchise. Buses will fail as well, and there will be more and more cars on the road. Villages already under current cuts are going to be cut off. People get anywhere. Are we going back to feudal times where you're born in a village, you live in the village, and you marry in the village, and you die in the village? I mean, that sounds a bit dramatic, but this is the sort of reality that we're talking about. This GCP money is a one-off. It is the last bus in town. It's the last opportunity. No government is going to throw another £500 million at Cambridge if we fail to achieve anything. They'll take back what hasn't been used. But the financially challenged, again, I'm going to talk about. These are the people that I care about. These are the people that people tell me they care about. To be able to help those people, we need these buses to run. We need us to make sacrifices. I make sacrifices. I travel everywhere, almost everywhere by bike. And I'm probably the oldest person in this room, probably. And I travel everywhere by bike. My wife has not heard the argument. Unlike Nick's, she argues with me. And that's how it should be. But she's started to use a bike. She's started to leave the car at home. So our car hardly ever leaves home now. We, as Andy said, we have to be prepared to stand up. We have to be prepared to give up something so that the poor, the weak, the less able, the children of the next generation, so that the climate, I could go on, couldn't I? And everybody knows what these words are. These are not like magic words. Everybody knows about them. So I'm going to stop there. I think I've sort of now come to a decision about how I want to vote on this. And I hope everybody else has. But I hope people hear this message. It is the last bus in town.
Very much, Dave, for that. And in the absence of any more points, I think I will probably, at this point, rise, like you have done, because we have been sitting down for too long, and wrap up the debate as well. It is really very important because it's been over a month that we members of this board have waited to address the public on this issue. And what a month it has been. There is something that I have to say first, and that is that over the past month, while we were busy thinking about all this, there has been some unwarranted criticism of officers who have contributed to the debate in the last month. And I am very concerned that we seem to be going through a period where civil servants are treated really appallingly. So before I say anything else, I want to extend the board's formal thanks and appreciation to all those officers who have gone out and explained the detailed and the plans with such knowledge and expertise, while we took our time to reflect on the feedback that we were receiving ahead of the meeting today. Today, the next phase of our journey begins. In this age of instant action and reaction, we too frequently forget that democracy is based on the ability to look past the headlines and have a serious, grown-up and detailed conversation ahead of decisions that impact the lives of all of us, and we owe everybody that. This is very much a marathon, not a sprint. Today we fire only the starting gun on a process of engagement, the scale of which this region has never seen. My first plea to all of you who are listening right now is, as we prepare to go out and engage, please get on this journey with us. If you are concerned about some of the stuff that we are proposing, talk to us about those concerns. We want to discuss those concerns. If you have questions, we want to answer them. We haven't made up our mind where this scheme is going, and we won't before we have done that. This isn't the first piece of engagement that we have done on transport in Greater Cambridge, as has been said, although it's certainly one of the most ambitious yet. And the theme running through the previous exercises that we have conducted is this: be bold. Be bold and take action. Because movement in our region is on an unsustainable trajectory. If we decided to abandon these proposals right now and do nothing, we would have to stand in front of you right now and defend the status quo as it is now. The current situation is completely indefensible. Being able to is the bedrock of social mobility. It underpins educational attainment, personal growth, and the ability to secure a good job for a good wage. It is a basic right, like housing. And as such, it can't be dependent on the whims on the market. There must be a satisfactory offer which is available to everyone, regardless of age, income, or disability. A provision which is accessible, efficient, affordable, but also, very importantly, reliable. Reliable doesn't just mean get me from A to B reliably today. It means be there for me always. It means allow me to choose a job or a house where I know I will be able to access all those people, all those places, and all those things that matter to me. Gone must be the days of showing up to the bus stop to a sign saying no more buses from this stop from tomorrow. Gone must be rural isolation and children unable to follow their educational aspirations because the college they would like to attend is not accessible. And gone must be this endless cycle of cuts to the public services we all rely on, by companies that run them not based on need, but on profit. Isn't it time we took back control? We must unlock freedom, and freedom must be everyone's freedom, or it isn't worthy of being called that. Freedom to use one's own car, if that is a genuine choice, born of something other than a lack of alternatives. And if one's own car is used, then the experience must be far better than it is today. Gone must be the endless gridlocks and delays, leading to congestion and harmful pollution. We are not expecting everyone to change their behavior instantly. Carts don't go before horses, and sticks don't come before carrots. We will put a public transport system in place the size of which this region has never seen. And we will run it for years before any charge is put in place. This was our commitment always, and it will continue to be. For those on the lowest incomes who are worried about making ends meet, we will look after you. If you are able to make the switch to the bus, we will set your fares at £1 in the city or £2 if you're commuting into the city from anywhere in Cambridge. If you aren't able to make the switch to the bus, we will give you financial help. We will give you substantial discounts. If your journeys are regular, we will give you substantial discounts, or we will provide you with free car trips if your car use is occasional. We will provide extensive support and exemption packages for the disabled, the health, care and care home workers on whom we all depend. We are facing, it used to be the twin challenge, wasn't it, of energy and climate, but it is now a three challenge, a cost of living crisis, an energy crisis, and a climate crisis. The time for timidity is over. The time for callous disinterest is over. We've got a problem, let's do something about it, shall we? I will now try to sit down again. These chairs are really heavy. And having wrapped up the debate, we have recommendations that we need to vote on. We are recommended to note the feedback from 2021 Making Connections, note the feedback from the focus groups and workshops, and agree a public consultation on a proposed package of measures to improve public transport services and active travel, and introduce a sustainable travel zone comprising a road user charging scheme as set out in section 7. Public consultation only. We are not agreeing the proposals yet. All those in favour, please raise your hands. There's only 3 voting members of the board. I am going to take that as unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. We've gone on quite a bit, as I knew we would and as we should. I'm going to take just over 5 minutes break, if that's okay, so we can go to the toilet. Thank you very much. people are happy to take their seats. Do we have everyone present who needs to be? Nick? Hello? Yes? Good, fabulous.
You haven't got Brian, actually. Brian.
Oh, Brian. But we should call the meeting to order. It's not called a hammer, isn't it? What's it called? Gavel, there you go. Anyway, is everyone here who needs to be? Perfect. In which case, we have got agenda item number 8 to deal with. Is it number 8, the next one?
Yeah.
Yes. Cambourne to Cambridge. This agenda item will be dealt with as follows. Public questions, of which there are 7, I think? 10 public questions on this item, followed by, there's one representative from one of our partner bodies addressing us. There will be officer answers to those interventions. We will receive a presentation, again from the officers, then Councillor Bick will present the Assembly feedback on this item. There he is. And after that, we will have the Executive Board debate. So, we have got public questions on this item. The first one on my list is James Littlewood. James, are you here? Here you go. Whenever you're ready.
Hi, thank you. Chair, before I ask my question, I'd like to notify you that we circulated a petition regarding this agenda item, which has over 800 signatures, which we wish to present to you today. But we've been told that protocol means that that will have to be presented to your next meeting, after which you will have already made a decision. You might want to consider whether that protocol adequately allows people's views to be considered in your decision making. Now to our question. Notwithstanding the fact that the board wanted the EIA, or environmental impact assessment, to be undertaken so that you could understand the impact of the scheme before you decided whether to proceed, this report makes clear that the assessment is still underway and that surveys are still being carried out. It appears that both an environmental survey, including a full ecological baseline, and a landscape visual impact assessment are still to be finalised. The public have been told in the consultation that habitats are not expected to be sensitive, but we and you do not know this for sure. The report does briefly mention the significant impacts, for example, at paragraphs 4.36 and 4.52, it mentions the Coton Orchard, the City Wildlife Site, the Bin Brook, and the presence of Barbastelle bats. However, the report does not provide any information regarding the significance of the impacts and how such impacts are to be avoided or mitigated. Members are being asked to agree progressing with the application to government in advance of knowing the full facts of the impacts of the scheme on wildlife and the landscape. This report is mostly about the EIA consultation, and therefore it's clearly premature for the board to be making a decision to proceed to the next stage without knowing what the significant impacts will be. We don't understand why you are being asked to discuss this now rather than in November, when it's likely that such information will be available to you. A report in November would not hold up the progress of the scheme in any way. Please will you request that a report comes back to you in November, which includes information about the significant impacts and plans to avoid and mitigate them. Thank you.
Very much, James. I will just make two comments in response to your point about the petition just now. The first one is I understand that our constitution states petitions are taken not to the board but to the assembly, which met on the 8th of September. My personal recommendation would be if this passes the board today, this item will come to the county council for decision. They take petitions and it's actually, I think, a much easier process. So I recommend you consider doing that when this item comes to the county council. Thank you for your questions. We will answer after I've taken the rest of them. Do we have Gabriel Fox?
Yeah, yes, I'm here. I'm online.
Perfect. Whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. I brought to the attention of the Joint Assembly at their recent meeting the latest real-time bus journey data on the existing City 4 bus service running between Cambourne and Cambridge, data which show that the service now runs freely at all times, including during the school term and during morning and evening rush hours, with an average peak hours journey time of half an hour all the way to the city centre. And if you subtract the dwell time at what amounts to more than 20 bus stops on the route, the journey is barely 25 minutes, which is actually better than the GCB has predicted for its route with an off-road section across Madingley Hill. Responding to my question, Mr. Blake stated, although without providing any evidence, that the car is coming back. In fact, the data very clearly show that that is untrue. Certainly as far as Madingley Hill and the rest of the C2C route are concerned. The average weekday morning peak journey time down Madingley Hill was 7 minutes in May, 7 minutes in June, and you guessed it, 7 minutes in July. Residents all along the route have always supported the overall objective of better bus journeys, but have long and consistently argued for a sensitive, respectful and proportionate scheme, sensitive to our local environment, respectful of taxpayers' money and proportionate to the problem at hand. We now have incontrovertible evidence that the congestion that triggered this project has gone away and is not returning. Even with the additional housing planned, it's clearly not going to come back to anything like the same degree or anything like the degree that would warrant an off-road segment of this C2C route. So will the GCP Executive Board therefore at last agree to do right by the local community and discontinue an expensive and unnecessary off-road route along the Coton corridor? And given the very eloquent comments of Councillor Bajan earlier on, that this is a £500 million injection that we will never see again, instead choose to use that money wisely and not wastefully by focusing on an upgrade to the Madingley Road that will satisfy the local plan and provide both the transport quality and the future proofing that this scheme needs.
Thank you, Gabriel. Now, my notes say that Dr. Marilyn Treacy is next, and she will ask 3 questions. The first one on behalf of herself, and the second one on behalf of Anna Graisley, and the third one on behalf of Sam on Bonkers Busway. Dr. Treacy, do we have you? Yes. Oh, in the room, perfect. Whenever you're ready.
Thank you. We were dismayed to see that all Coton Group responses to the EIA were misrepresented in the original WSP report. That's version 2.5. This included savage editing of the Parish Council's response. We're pleased that most of the errors have now been rectified, but we're not satisfied with the explanation given for the original errors. It is disappointing that the GCP officers were presenting incorrect information to the public and the Joint Assembly. Coton is the village most affected by the off-road busways, so it's disappointing to see again that officers are omitting important information about the village. The board papers appear designed to airbrush Coton's importance as a necklace village. To give a few examples from section 4. Regarding landscape, it is stated that C2C runs across a landscape that is mostly low farmland. Untrue. Madingley Hill is one of the most prominent raised areas in the Cambridge Greenbelt, visible for miles around and has National Trust covenants. The importance of Madingley Hill as part of the setting of the American cemetery is omitted. Regarding heritage, the documents omit to reference that Coton has a 12th century Grade 1 listed church and 12 listed buildings. This information is listed on other villages. Regarding nature, the description of Coton Orchard omits to mention that it is a 100-year-old ancient orchard. It's the 8th largest in the country, the largest in Cambridgeshire, and it will be bisected and all but destroyed by this route. My question, Chair, is how can you have confidence in the material you're being presented with in this headline EIA report when important facts are omitted or misrepresented?
Thank you, Dr. Tracy. Do you have further questions?
Yes, which one would you like next?
Well, my notes say you are asking a question on behalf of Anna Graisley. Is that next?
Anna Gaisley is a director of Coton Orchard. She writes, I'm writing on behalf of the directors of Coton Orchard Limited, landlord for Blue Diamond Garden Centre and Coton Orchard, and the landowner. My question refers to page 80, section 5.8 of the GCP Executive Board agenda for Wednesday the 28th of September 2022, which states, following discussion with the landowner and ecological surveys, the alignment is being reviewed to seek to avoid the few surviving original trees within the orchard. While we have made written objections and other submissions in response to public consultations, there have been no discussions with us pertaining to the alignment of the GCP preferred off-road C2C busway. The original trees from 1922, plus hundreds of mature fruit trees, which will shortly reach veteran status, span the breadth of the orchard. Given that the proposed scheme is for a 20-metre wide width roadway bisecting the land, plus further clearance to allow for building works, please can you explain precisely how you would avoid these trees?
Thank you very much. And finally, on behalf of Sam?
Sam, with his 10,000 Twitter followers, would like to say thank you for accepting his question. And I just mentioned that following the meeting, he'll pass the reply on to his many followers. So the question is as follows. As published in the Cambridgeshire County Council's most recently available audited statement of accounts, 180 million of City Deal government grant funding has been received as of 2021. Given the comprehensive income and expenditure statement shows an expenditure, i.e. deficit, of 173 million, we extrapolate that those funds have been spent. The Mott MacDonald outline business case, financial case 2020, estimates a build cost for the preferred option for the C2C project to be 160 million. Adjusting for inflation using the ONS indices and assuming a 2023 start, this would equate to between 220 million and 436 million, far in excess of the remainder of the second tranche payment receivable from 2022 to 2025 of 120 million. Where will the money come from to complete the C2C project? should it be progressed today. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Dr. Treacy. Now, Sue and Terry Spencer. Do we?
Terry Spencer.
Oh, it's just Terry. Thank you, Terry. Take your time whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. In the summer of 2021, the Superintendent of the American Cemetery submitted a note to the GCP executive. The GCP executive dismissed his concerns. The note stated as follows: "The Madingley Hill landscape is a place of beauty that has been valued by many generations and is worthy of preservation. Its stunning viewshed extends north towards Ely Cathedral, east towards King's College Chapel, south over Redmeadow Hill and beyond, and with the picturesque villages of Coton and Madingley nestled either side. In 1945, Major General Lee of the US Army requested Madingley Hill to become the site of a permanent commemorative cemetery and memorial to honour fallen US service personnel of the Second World War, specifically because of its natural beauty and unparalleled viewshed. The US government asked for this specific terrain. No other terrain would do, because the viewshed was the key selling point then as it is now. Today, the Cambridge American Military Cemetery is a world-renowned monument and a Grade 1 listed landscape by Historic England. Extending south, the unspoilt open countryside located in the Greenbelt is extensively protected by National Trust covenants. We are concerned that GCP's proposal to build a tarmac bus road across the south side of the hill would irreparably damage this unique and precious landscape, compromising the setting of the American Military Cemetery, severing historic community access routes, and paving the way for further urban encroachment in its vicinity. That's the end of his note. So could the chair of the executive board please explain why the above concerns were dismissed? I should add, and I'd like it noted, that the on-road bus lane down Madingley Hill, which has been proposed by Coton Busway Action Group as an alternative to the off-road solution, would not encroach onto the American cemetery land.
Thank you very much, Terry. We will follow procedure and have officer answers first, but when it comes to the debate, I will come to you. Who's next? Carolyn.
Chair, and I would really appreciate an answer from the chair. Attended joint assembly and executive board meetings to ask questions. In all that time, I've been trying to convey to the board the essential fact that the off-road section of the C2C busway from Madingley Mulch to the M11 is entirely unnecessary. This section is now almost the only section that is truly off-road, yet will cost far more and will involve more land take of greenbelt and covenanted land than any other section. We have proved beyond doubt, contrary to the assertions made by your officers, that an inbound-only bus lane on Madingley Road is viable without land take. In addition, journey time for on-road buses on this section of the route is directly comparable and possibly slightly better than GCP's own estimates for the off-road route. Buses travelling along Madingley Road are much more easily routed to places of work or education than from Grange Road. Moreover, an on-road route satisfies the requirements of the local plan, enables development to continue at Bourne Airfield, and requires no expensive land take. You have listened to the residents of Hardwick and decided that an on-road option is viable on St Neots Road. You have listened to a stakeholder request and have rerouted the off-road busway away from the waterworks site. It is within your power to stop the destruction of productive arable farmland on Madingley Hill and the devastation of irreplaceable wildlife in Coton Orchard. It is within your power to stop the irreversible damage to a precious landscape and village by keeping the bus on Madingley Road. Will the board listen to the residents of Coton before it is too late?
Thank you, Caroline, and as above, we will come to you at the board debate point. Alan Tracy, whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon, Chair.
Good afternoon, and thank you for coming.
Thank you. I'm asking this question on behalf of Debbie Whitton-Spriggs. Her question is as follows. The traditional orchard at Coton is the largest in Cambridgeshire and the 8th largest in the UK. These orchards are priority habitats because they are very similar to the indigenous wood and scrub once found throughout the British Isles, and which produces much higher levels of biodiversity than might otherwise be expected. The proposed 20-metre width of busway that will run right across the orchard, along with further clearing required for construction, will fragment this precious natural resource to such an extent that it is effectively removed. Contrary to the claims of the GCP proposal, and as the Orchard Biodiversity Officer for the People's Trust for Endangered Species has stated, no amount of new grass or tree planting will mitigate this loss. What possible justification can there be for this destruction?
Thank you very much, Alan, for asking the question. Now, I think we should have Alistair Burford, who's on Teams. Do we have him?
You do indeed.
Fantastic. We can hear you, so go ahead.
Thank you. I find it surprising that today the officers are asking for the board for approval to progress the C2C scheme to the TWA stage, despite the fact that the environmental impact assessment has not been fully completed. Over the last 5 years, at every stage of the scheme, I've heard both the Joint Assembly and the board asking to see an EIA before progressing the scheme. Indeed, I believe it's an requirement that an EIA is carried out before requesting approval for the TWA. We're being told that some of the EIA has been completed, but the critical part, which runs through the ancient orchard at Coton, has not. Evidence gleaned by local residents indicates a strong presence of both soprano, pistrel, and common bent-winged bats within the orchard, which will most likely be confirmed within the EIA. If or when the EIA confirms the presence of bats and other environmentally sensitive issues within the Coton orchard, what would happen next? Will the route be revised to avoid the sensitive area as it was at the waterworks site? And will this mean the routes go north towards Pole Hill Garden Centre or south towards the Coton Village Centre? Or is there another route that we've not heard of? I would therefore ask the board members, not the officers, the board members, given that they are the decision makers today, firstly, explain how they can feel comfortable progressing the scheme without having all of what may be vital information. And secondly, if the board does progress the scheme without this information and the route has to be moved in sometime in the future, will there be another public consultation? Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Alistair. Josh, I have you on my list again. Thank you, whenever you're ready.
The Cambourne to Cambridge project extends to where the route meets Grange Road, yet all of the buses using the route will have to travel along Grange Road to West Road. This is the most constrained section of Grange Road, and the required improvements to facilitate this should be brought within this project. Opportunities to amend the junction location on Grange Road should be explored, as well as increasing the corridor width between the existing track by the University Rugby Club and West Road. Without improvements, this section of Grange Road will put many off travelling actively, as well as compromising the quality of the public transport provision. Will the GCP extend the project scope to encompass this short section of Grange Road? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Josh. That concludes the member of the public. We do, however, have, now is it Helen or Helene? Or Councillor Leeming from South Cambridgeshire District Council. Are you here somewhere?
Yes, I'm here online. Hello.
How do you pronounce your name again?
Just Helen.
Helen, perfect. Whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. Following on from the previous discussion, it's clear to me that people value dependable public buses and that they're so important for our growing region's future, air quality, connectivity and health. The current adopted local plan requires the Cambourne to Cambridge busway. The delivery of West Cambourne and Bourne Airfield is dependent on it. And while the pandemic has temporarily reduced traffic levels, they are beginning to increase again. And this is without the additional growth in Cambourne and Bourne Airfield. In Cambourne, we have a relatively young, largely working population requiring better access to the city for employment, leisure, health facilities and education, particularly for sixth forms. Currently, we have no safe cycle route into Cambridge, and Cambourne currently has a population of 12,000 people, which will rise significantly with the development of West Cambourne. We are already South Cambridgeshire's largest town. We must plan for the future in addition to reflecting on our current position. I would like to ask how the residents of Cambourne will benefit from the C2C bus route and associated cycle path.
Thank you very much, Helen. That concludes my public speakers for today. So before we get to the debate, we have a few more items to come. Peter, would you like to answer those questions?
Thank you, Chair. I'll take them in order. In terms of James Littlewood's question, the Environmental Impact Assessment is a complex document which will be submitted as part of the full Transport and Works Act order application to government. It will be scrutinised in detail at public inquiry following submission to the Department of Transport. It's largely complete, but some small survey data work is being finalised. The board paper provides a thorough resume of the key issues and confirms that, like most schemes of this nature, the environmental impact of the scheme is mixed. But importantly, whilst the sensitivity of Coton Orchard, as well as the risk presented to the Barnstable bats, are issues which are understood and will continue to require further work as the scheme progresses, there are no emerging issues which might suggest that the scheme should not proceed. In line with other schemes, the Executive Board are not being asked to approve the EIA, but rather to a degree that it should be submitted to the Department for Transport as part of the TWAO process, should the County Council choose to do so. In terms of Gabriel Fox's question, the outline business case sets out the justification for the scheme and scheme selection and was subject to an independent audit in 2021. The scheme is intended to address not just current issues, but the planned housing and employment growth along the corridor. Traffic levels continue to return to normal, as we heard in the previous report, with cars returning faster than other modes. The GCP will continue to review traffic levels and the business case for the scheme, as we are required to do so by the Department for Transport. Turning to Dr. Treacy's question, as a standard, all consultation responses are and were published online and were available to view. There was no incorrect information presented. There were a small number of omissions from from the summary of stakeholders, and this was corrected as soon as the error was identified. A summary of the salient issues is presented within the papers. Getting to the question that was asked on behalf of Anna Gaisley, Mrs. Gaisley has very recently permitted ecological surveys of the orchard, which has identified 7 surviving original trees. We are continuing to work with our consultants to develop an alternative alignment, marginal realignment to avoid these, and we would welcome further dialogue with Mrs. Gaisley and her organisation as to how we take that forward. Turning to the question from Sam, the Cambourne to Cambridge scheme will be funded from the city deal made available by government and Section 106 developer contributions from along the route. In terms of the question from Terry Spencer, the importance of the cemetery is well understood and is one of the reasons why an off-road scheme is being recommended. The alternatives have been assessed and have been subject to an independent audit. The alternative proposal by the Coton Bus Action Group would involve lots of land and trees adjacent to and potentially on the cemetery site, and that would be significant. Turning to the question from Carolyn Postgate, the C2C scheme has been developed in line with relevant government guidance and has evolved over the years. Indeed, as the question acknowledges, in a number of instances we have amended the proposals to seek to accommodate stakeholder views and following consultation. The recommended scheme is considered to be the best performing option, has been subject to an independent audit, and the recommendation is to take that forward to a Transport and Works Act order application. In terms of the question from Debbie Whitten-Spriggs, we fully appreciate the importance of the orchard. For this reason, we continue to explore ways of minimising land take and to fashion an alignment that limits any adverse impacts. Overall, however, the route selection is intended to provide a balance between a number of factors along the route, including Madingley Wood SSI and the American Cemetery. The question from Alistair Burford is similar to James Littlewood question. So in terms of the EIA will be submitted for public scrutiny as part of the Transport and Works Act order. The paper outlines the key issues and provides a necessary resume. And in line with other schemes, the board will not be asked to approve the EIA, but rather to submit it as part of that application, subject to agreement by the County Council. Finally, in terms of Josh Grantham's question, that already buses using Grange Road, the U-bus uses Grange Road, cycle and general traffic also exists there. The proposals for making connections that we heard about previously will potentially significantly reduce traffic along that route. We will, of course, be working on the junction improvements on Grange Road as part of this scheme. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Peter. Did we have an answer to Helen?
Apologies, Councillor Leeming. So the Cambourne to Cambridge high quality public transport scheme will significantly enhance connectivity along that corridor between Cambourne, the new developments of Bourne Airfield, and West Cambridge and Cambridge itself. It will significantly improve travel opportunities, in particular from Cambourne. We know from our previous consultations and work we've had with Cambourne Village College that younger people struggle to access Cambridge, limiting life choices and opportunities.
Thank you, Peter. Now, part of preparing ourselves for the board debate on this item, we will now have a presentation on this. Peter, is that you again?
Thank you, Chair. Figure 2, paragraph 1.6 outlines where this scheme is in terms of development and the rationale for the next steps in terms of the recommendations to note the outcome of the EIA consultation and non-technical summary, to note some changes to the route following that consultation, and to approve a formal request to Cambridge County Council to submit a Transport Works Act order application. Section 4 outlines in detail considerations from the EIA, covering a variety of topics that are relevant in terms of your considerations today. The consultation ran between May and July 2022. Paragraph 5.3 outlines the responses that we received, and then following the feedback from the Joint Assembly, paragraphs 5.4 to 5.10 outline areas where we received comments, but we've decided not to make recommendations to you in terms of changes to the scheme. 6 outlines, again, the recommendations, but particularly para 6.1b outline a series of changes to the preferred alignment that we are suggesting following the consultation. First one relates to the waterworks site as a result of stakeholder requests and the ecological value of the site. The second one relates to the alignment through Hardwick. This was by far the point that we received the most feedback on in terms of the consultation. And we put out 2 options as part of that consultation: stick with the off-road solution that had the impact in terms of the trees and the local environment, or develop an on-road solution that would require some form of filtering or limiting of traffic. We are proposing that there would be an on-road solution at that location. It would be managed via a bus gate, but that we continue to work with the parish council and local residents as to how we can manage and mitigate the impact on them in terms of their access. The issues around that particular point do not exist at the moment, but the expectation is, following the development of Bourne or the developments along that corridor, they will develop in time. So we want to work with the communities to see how we can manage that now. The third bullet point relates to an existing poorly used bridleway, and we want to improve connectivity to the bridleway by connecting that with the Cambourne to Cambridge route. And then the final change relates to a suggestion that we had from Dry Drayton Parish Council about putting in a non-motorised user route at a previous stage of consultation, which we sought your agreement and you agreed to do. And that went out as part of the EIA consultation. There was a more mixed response to that in terms of the final route solution, and it is likely that a different alignment would be required. That, in the opinion of the and the project team, will be difficult to justify under the Transport and Works Act order process. So what we are suggesting is that we remove that non-motorised user group from the TWAO application, but that we continue to work with the parish council and we take forward that as part of our wider programme. I'm happy to leave that there, Chair, and try and answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Peter. Thank you. Now, this item was discussed at the Assembly on the 8th of September. Councillor Big, what did the Assembly have to say about this?
Chair, the Assembly made two points in response to the report. One was in welcoming and noting the 4 changes to the alignment that were made following the consultation on the environment impact assessment. We did, however, ask that the output from that consultation, which didn't give rise to any change, should also be reported to the board for transparency and for understanding of the rationale. And so we welcome the fact that that has been included in your report. There were also some questions around biodiversity net gain, and it was suggested to us that that could be dealt with under the aegis of a focused report on biodiversity net gain across all projects. And we look forward to that and hope that that does deliver the discussion and attention we think is necessary to that. But in overall terms, the Assembly is persuaded that the project should proceed to the next stage. We remained persuaded of its considerable benefits and believe that significant adaptations have been made over the long course of this project in response to findings of all sorts, but primarily from public consultations. And so we encourage you to go forward with the recommendations you've got. Would just say that my written report should be referring to the environmental impact assessment, not the equality impact assessment. They're both very important, but this was about the environment. I think that's EQIA, not EIA. So apologies for that typographical problem, but that's our report.
Not quite the same, are they? But thank you very much. Thank you very much, Tim. Which brings us to ourselves, the decision makers, having a discussion about this item. Would anybody like to kick us off? And then Brian.
First this time rather than second. Certain general points, and I'm not a technical expert on this, the EIA consultation, don't know about this scheme, but we're quite close to Cambridge South train station. The EIA, like you say, went through into the public inquiry, and actually that was quite a good exhaustive process. Can't say how this process goes, but lots of issues were addressed ahead of the public inquiry for those who had concerns about Cambridge South station. So I think I have seen that process work before. I don't know if I had the process to comment particularly for this. I note the new alignments and the new proposals. I think one of the criticisms GCP have had in the past is they don't listen to feedback. When we started this scheme, we had a park and ride on Madingley Hill, and a number of changes that have changed over the years, many years. And so this is an example of we have listened, we've optimised the scheme, we've done our best with it. So that's all positive. The scheme itself, which we shouldn't be revisiting again, but within the context of our previous conversation, let's do it. I don't think I would be able to support a new park and ride which is not served by an off-road bus solution. And it's about behavioural change. The thought of driving to a park and ride and then getting on a bus and basically then just following the same route into town, probably through the same congestion, is really not going to drive the behavioural change we need, however much we think it might be feasible. I have said before that our employees and employees of business, generally speaking, will not want to use buses which only are segregated from the traffic through a bus lane. There are places where that can only be the case, but where it's possible to have an off-road solution, we would. My final comment is perhaps a little bit more negative in some ways, is this project's now been going for 5 years. And as many of and I've had a lot of respect for the speakers who come along every time to these meetings. Fortunately, some can now come virtually as well. This has been a very long process, and the uncertainty it provides for residents over an extended period of time is regrettable. It's not just GCP schemes. I'm involved in other schemes in the local area, which similarly, they can't choose which route they're going to take. They spend ages going through these consultations. It's a series of unfortunate events and political machinations over the years. Maybe we won't have as many schemes with GCP moving forward, but any efforts we can make to reduce the consultation time whilst getting the full breadth and depth of that consultation is something we should definitely aim for. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Brian.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of things is that was questions were being asked was to do with the cost. And so I'm interested in understanding what sort of proportion Section 106 versus GCP funding. You didn't mention the total cost and whether or not the business case can remain dynamic in so that we can react to inflationary pressures, for example.
So in many respects, the business case is required to be dynamic. So there will be a further iteration at the full business case stage, which will be brought back to you for a final decision, where there will be final costings and all that relevant information. all of that subject to the Transport and Works Act order process that would occur, as Andy suggested, similar to the Cambridge South process. It would be the same process. The current expectation is around £30 million would be a developer contribution for the scheme, but obviously all of that information will be updated and presented to you before a final decision is made.
Sorry, on what's out of a total 30 million from Section 106?
The published number is 160 million.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And one other question, if I may. When I was on the Assembly, we asked, or I asked, more specifically, about the delay at Scotland Farm Park and Ride in terms of the total transit time. Are we happy that that doesn't negatively impact the case for a rapid transit system?
We are, but again, that's something that will be reviewed as part of the final business case. I don't expect our position to change, but that's why we have a process that updates the business case at various stages. So there will be a formal updating of the business case, and that question will then be asked again.
Thank you, Brian and Peter. Are there any more comments on this? If there are not, I can make a couple. Thank you, everyone. It's been interesting to hear all the contributions. I mean, there are a couple of things that were raised where questioners wanted to hear the decision makers, so I will summarize those. The American cemetery, we are going nowhere near it, as far as I have been reassured. If that were not to be the case, I get the feeling that somebody's phone would be ringing and Mr. Biden would be on the other side. So this is a really serious matter. Is this busway necessary? And I'm very glad Helen joined us earlier, because I keep thinking to myself, won't somebody think of Cambourne? I looked it up on Wikipedia just now, and it still says that as per the 2011 census, the population of Cambourne is 8,100. Now, I rather believe that to be quite out of date. Sorry, Brian? 12,000, there you go. And growing. Now, those people have absolutely zero ways of commuting sustainably into Cambridge, and quite a lot of them do. And quite a lot of them are quite desperate for that to actually be happening. In terms of the environmental impact assessment, once again, I believe that we have done everything that is required up to the present time. We have things that we still need to do, because a lot of the environment is season dependent and year dependent and cycle dependent. All of that will be done when the seasons allow it. And all of that will be considered as part of the statutory consultation process. It will be a national process, which will happen, and everything will be available for that, and representations will be taken during that. And should we consult any more about this process? I really rather think not, I'm afraid. I think 3 consultations, 4th one upcoming, should be plenty. We do need to get on, as Andy says. So I would be pleased to start taking these recommendations for a vote now, unless anybody's got anything more that they would like to add. I see nothing. Therefore, we are being required to note the outcome of the EIA consultation to date. We are required to note that the report will recommend a preferred route, which differs from that approved at the previous stage, with 4 more specific changes which reflect stakeholder concerns. It's all in the paper, I won't read them. And we are asked to approve a formal request to Cambridgeshire County Council to approve a submission of a Transport and Works order, with the GCP working closely with the county as the Highways Authority. So there will be more consultation and increasingly more authoritative voices weighing in. Which we encourage everyone to engage with. When this comes to the County Council, we will take comments and petitions and everything else. So can we vote on these recommendations? All those in favour? I once again see none against. I will take the 2 Andys to be happy as well. Thank you very much, everybody. We will move to the next item, which is number 9. Cambridge Eastern Access. Once again, we have, how many public questions on this? 2 public questions on this, which the officers will respond before we do. We will have the item introduced to us, feedback from Councillor Bick, and debate the item. We have a question from James Littlewood. James, yes, there you go. Whenever you're ready.
Hi there, hello again. A consultation on possible locations for a park and ride site was conducted in December 2021. The site selection and appraisal report appended to this report was published in May 2022. I can see no record of the Executive Board having discussed the site selection process until now. However, you are being asked to note the preference for option 1, park and ride. Agreeing this recommendation will result in the outline business case being prepared without the opportunity for you as members to ask questions and debate the site selection process. Option 1 results in development in the Greenbelt. Options beyond the inner Greenbelt boundary have been dismissed. By default, therefore, members are being asked to rule out consideration of other options. When will members be given the opportunity to discuss the site selection process and alternatives to providing park and ride sites in the Greenbelt? Thank you.
Thank you very much, James. Now, Josh, did you have a question on this item?
The outline designs for the project have made many positive steps forward, yet concerns remain and several areas for improvement still exist. For example, there would appear to be a lack of flexibility within the county signals team, which is resulting in many suboptimal solutions for users. In order to deliver a successful scheme, all stakeholders must align behind a common goal and look beyond minimising their own siloed objectives. In the recent meeting of the non-motorised user groups, the design team said that they will shortly be undertaking junction assessments in accordance with LTM 120 and completing a road safety audit, which is welcome. Will these assessments be shared with stakeholders, and will the GCP table the designs with Active Travel England to ensure the best possible outcomes? Thank you.
Thank you very much again, Josh. Now, we don't have any more questions on this, so Peter, would you like to give us a response to what we've heard so far?
Thank you, Chair. A detailed report on the options of park and ride are appended to the paper. The recommendation of the report is that you request officers undertake a business case in terms of a new park and ride site to the east. Only when that work is completed and an associated consultation undertaken will this return to you with a preferred recommendation for a park and ride site. In terms of Josh Grantham's question, so the scheme will be designed in line with government guidance, including LTN 120 and the need for a road safety audit, which we are happy to share. As a participant in the GCP Active Travel Group, Camp Cycle will continue to be consulted, and we're happy to involve Active Travel England if partners feel that's appropriate. Thank you, Chair.
Very much, Peter. Peter, would you like to introduce the report for us now?
Thank you, Chair. In many respects, this is a signposting report. So it's signposting to next steps in terms of the work coming in from the Eastern Corridor. And there are essentially 3 elements to the work. So firstly is there is an outline business case associated for the first phase, which is focuses on Newmarket Road, which is what is deliverable now, the challenges that we face now. And what that is asking you to do is to approve the business case and agree next steps, which is detailed design and associated consultation. The second section of that encompasses the park and ride and whether there are shorter term opportunities for relocating that to deliver size, scale, capacity, very much in line with the Making Connections conversation that we had at the start of your meeting. But that is then asking your requesting officers to go away and produce the business case for that and associated consultation and report back to you with what that with what that would look like. And then the third element, which is simply for noting in terms of the body of the board, is recognising that access from the east is very much linked to the emerging local plans, so in terms of the airport and the Marshall site, and we very much need to keep a watching brief on that, as well as we continue to work with partner authorities, County Council, Suffolk County Council and others to petition for improvements to the Newmarket to Cambridge railway line. Board members who've been around for a while will recall that we funded the Cambridge Corridor rail network study, which came out with a variety of recommendations, but it said under any growth scenario, let alone the growth scenario that we are currently facing, the Newmarket to Cambridge rail line falls over, which is probably not a surprise to anybody, frankly, but that actually we need to continue petitioning Network Rail, who were party to that study, to actually seek to bring forward improvements to the infrastructure to allow that rail line to be progressed. I'll stop there, Chair, and happily try and answer any questions that members may have.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you very much. Tim, what did the Assembly have to say on this item?
We supported the outline business case for Phase A, but made a couple of other points. The first of all was that there was an element of the Assembly who follows this particular project, which was not convinced of what's stated as a preference for the park and ride site, and part of our overall message to you was that the next phase in relation to that should not close down on the other options, and that matter wasn't regarded as settled by members in the Assembly. And there were some individual members talking about the benefits of other locations. And the other, which was partly in response to public question from residents of Coldham's Lane, the response to them about their concerns about the traffic volumes through their neighbourhood was through officers that the Making Connections project that we previously talked about today, and the network hierarchy review were the right place for that issue to be addressed. The Assembly did want to communicate to the board to make sure that did happen as part of those processes, because it obviously isn't primarily addressed by this project. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tim. Very useful. For our discussion now, does anybody have any comments at this stage? Go on, Andy.
I don't mind going first this time. So I'm going to use my history book again. I'm sure when we considered the earlier projects, we did have a choice of park and ride sites. So perhaps you just rehearse the answer. It feels like we should be keeping those options open, because one, it strengthens the case for the one you do choose, even if you then don't choose the other ones. But I think we've always had a debate about the park and ride sites. And again, when I was in my previous life on the Assembly, I did say I was underwhelmed a little bit by the eastern access proposals, and I understand that's in relation to the local plan and what may or may not happen in the future. But it instinctively feels wrong. Generally, I support moving the park and rides further out because they then connect to the Strategic Road Network. In this case, we're going to move it further out, but then not connect it to a segregated solution in the same way. So although I'm not positive, I'm not negative about it, I'm still a bit underwhelmed, to be honest.
So I think that is a fair challenge. Equally, the challenge we had previously is sitting here and saying, well, we're not going to do anything around the park and ride because we can't deal with the segregated bus solution because it's linked with the emerging plan, feels like we're sort of sitting on our hands and waiting for an emerging local plan to arrive. And then doing something about it. So I think it's a fair challenge, and we are trying to bridge that gap, but we absolutely follow the local plan. There's an extant local plan we follow, and there will be an emerging one that we need to feed into. And so I think that is a fair challenge, and I do think that's something that will come out in the outline business case work.
And on the park and ride, that's one of the reasons why I'm thinking keeping those park and ride options is a reasonable thing to be doing, because actually we haven't got the Part B yet, and to close us down to that one site seems premature.
I think that will come out in the business case work. I think that will be explored and examined, which will be presented to you for your consideration, and you can remind me of this conversation if I've not answered that question appropriately.
Is that okay, Andy? Shall we do Andy number 2, and then Brian?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, we're asked to note the preference for option P1 for the park and ride site. That doesn't necessarily preclude thinking about others in the future. The question I had, Peter, was, it sort of links back to the previous conversation. And on C2C, we're 5 years into that project. As was said, it's quite a long process. It's quite unsettling for the residents. Are there any things that we can learn from that process, which means in this one, where we are at an earlier stage in the step, don't spend 5 years going around the conversations while we still get the breadth and depth of input that we need to make a good decision?
Sort of touched on this in previous boards, picking up on that sort of length of time. So the project status that I showed in the Cambourne to Cambridge project, figure 2, page 68. That's the approach that Department for Transport require us to go through. And I think what we've done and what we've learned from the sort of the earlier work of the City Deal is to say, well, how do we map the public consultation clearly to those key stages? So there's something around a strategic stage, there's clearly something around an outline stage, and then there's something around the environmental, and in our case, some onward submission to the County Council. So I think providing absolute clarity on, there are probably 3 stages of consultation on this thing. Being absolutely clear what the expectation is then to communities. So they're absolutely, they understand the question that's been asked. They understand in some cases why we're not talking about a route alignment. We're talking about a strategic narrative. So we've just done it quite recently in terms of Waterbeach, strategic narrative. And immediately people want to know what the route alignment is. No, actually, that's the outline business case step. So I think what we've done in terms of our learning in terms of previous schemes is really mapping to the key stages of business case development that we're required to, the consultation elements of that, so where everybody's clear on the expectations in terms of the question that's being asked, what they will see and when, and then making sure we deliver on that.
Thank you, Peter. Is that okay, Andy? In which case, Brian? Oh, Brian's fine. Perfect. In which case, are we all fine? I think at this stage, do I need any more information? Yes, I do, but that's kind of the nature of this process. We're fairly early on. We are being recommended to approve the OBC, the outline business case for Newmarket Road Phase A. We are being recommended to note the preference for option P1, subject to all the rest. So I do understand that we're still able to keep everything on the table. It's not definite at this point. And we will note the scheme designs and the prospect of further consultations, which are necessary and are important, and I hope that they will be engaged with in due course. Is everyone happy with these proposals? Going once, going twice, everyone's nodding, so that's done. Thank you very much, everybody. That was relatively simple. We are now at number 10, the Greenways. Now, one question? Two questions. That's fine, to which we will answer and then hear from Tim and debate. Questions. Who's first? James, is that you?
Hi again. Cambridge past, present and future are trying to work with the GCP to ensure the design of the greenways is sensitive to heritage, landscape and ecology. The greenways pass through conservation areas in cities and villages, through open landscapes and past woodlands and hedgerows. We're concerned that Cambridgeshire County Council decided to implement a policy that red, 2 shades thereof, are the only colours that should be used on new cycle tracks for consistency. This conflicts with Historic England Streets for All advice on cycle infrastructure and design that states that specific colours are not a requirement. We're pleased to hear in response to our question to the GCP Joint Assembly that landscape character assessments will be undertaken for all the routes to ensure they are appropriate to the location. We are, however, concerned to have learnt since that conservation officers from the Greater Cambridgeshire Planning Service, who have specialist expertise and local knowledge, have not been consulted in the design of the greenways. Can you please tell us why this has not happened and confirm that they will be given an opportunity to input into the early design of greenways prior to public consultation? Thank you.
Thank you, James. Josh?
Thanks. CamCycle has attended many Greenway workshops in which the latest Greenway alignments and designs are shared and discussed in detail with a variety of stakeholders. In many of these discussions, we are told many of the major pieces of infrastructure needed to complete these routes and make them safe for all ages and abilities are being compromised due to budget constraints. For example, no underpass on the Barton Greenway, no tunnel under the A14 to the Waterbeach Greenway, and no underpass on the Haslingfield Greenway, to name but a few. We understand some design options will not be possible based on the current budget, but this decision-making process must be transparent and considered in the wider context of all of the greenways in order for the funding to be spent wisely. Many opportunities exist to reduce costs in other parts of the Greenway project. For example, a modal filter on Grantchester Road would remove the need for a boat path, and the shared route alongside Grantchester Road, saving millions of pounds and associated emissions. Will the GCP provide greater clarity on the budgets with stakeholders and ensure that they are engaged in the decision-making process in terms of infrastructure prioritisation so that the best outcomes can be achieved?
Thank you, Josh, very much. Peter, would we like to answer these questions?
I'll do my level best, Chair. In terms of James Littlewood's question, the GCP continues to engage with the Greater Cambridge Planning Service on greenways and indeed all of our projects, and this includes appropriate environmental teams. Workshops have been held and will continue to be held on each of the greenways with the Planning Service. In terms of Josh's question, the GCP welcomes the input from CamCycle and other stakeholders into the process through the workshops that we've held. Designs will develop, they will change for a variety of factors and reasons: environmental, deliverability, stakeholder feedback, and indeed budget. Each of the greenways will be coming back to the Executive Board individually from December, so you're all warned. And any changes or any proposed changes that will be put forward at that time and will be for the Board's consideration. In the meantime, we will continue with stakeholders to meet them through workshops. I hope that's helpful, Chair.
Thank you very much, Peter. Would you like to introduce the report now?
Thank you, Chair. So this report seeks to do a number of things. It seeks to outline a programme business case for the Greenways network. We are obliged under our agreement with government to produce a business case for all of our major schemes. What is appended to this report is a broad programme business case that sets the context and the strategic narrative for the Greenways network. As I sort of forewarned you of earlier, when we come back with the individual greenways, there will therefore be a tailored business case for each of that will be to life the costs and the benefits of each of the greenways at that point, which is probably more relevant in terms of your decision making than the programme-wide business case. The paper also outlines a wayfinding strategy. We think is very important. We think we can get on site really quite quickly, for example, in the Chisholm Trail with wayfinding, and so we've come up with two potential options, and we're suggesting that there is some sort of public poll or public consultation to do that. We outline a delivery plan over the next couple of years, so particularly at the Assembly, but in terms of previous considerations of the Board, you've asked for more information of what this looks like over the next few years, so bringing that to life. And then finally, there is a request that we have a pause, and it is only a pause, in the Waterbeach Greenway. The decision now dated back to 2020, there's a lot of things have changed. So in terms of the work that Urban and Civic have undertaken on Mere Way, the A10 cycle improvements, the recent decision around the relocated rail station, mean that I just want to make sure that what we're going to put in is a sensible, complete network whereby all these things are knitted together and we make the best, we bring the best possible Greenway back to you for that area. And what we're suggesting is a pause of a couple of months where we sit down initially with local representatives and then with local stakeholders, and then we've got a planned public consultation on the Water Beach busway in the new year. We would have then the Water Beach Greenway engagement as part of that. So we position it whereby it all makes sense and we're all clear that we've not missed a trick, given there's a variety of moving parts. Therefore, as driver's chair, I'll happily try and answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. No, that was very, very helpful, Peter. Thank you very much. Tim, what did we get in the Assembly for this one?
A lot of frustration on the speed of progress on this project. But the good news is that's because members of the Assembly like it so much and they want to sort of see some results as soon as possible. And I think the source of the frustration is something that I believe officers recognise, and at the earlier stages not having been under the direct control of the GCP for delivery. But what we are asking the board is to satisfy themselves that the resources necessary are now in place to deliver on timetable for this, because we have an opportunity to redeem this, and it will be worth redeeming. The other point was about the Water Beach Greenway, which Peter just referred to, and he persuaded the Assembly that there was a need and a value in pausing to review. We wanted to ask that all efforts be made to catch up after the pause, so that we are back on target for what we should have hoped for if there had not been a review, if you see what I mean. So that's our message. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tim, and may I say I feel exactly the same. Andy would like to speak.
And so, just declaring a minor conflict, which is that I live near Water Beach, and therefore I won't comment on that particular issue. But the more general thing is, I mean, I share the Assembly's frustration, and if anything, I would ask whether there's a way of accelerating this programme, because it's such an important initiative for the region. It will help with active travel, given some of the other constraints we face around stagecoaches decisions and so on recently with buses. Actually, the more infrastructure we can put in place to support people with cycling and active travel, the better. And so if there is a way of accelerating, I would like to see that.
Thank you, Andy. Shall I take Brian next?
Thank you, Chair. There's a couple of minor issues which I find particularly frustrating. So the County Council have said they don't like solar studs. And I know from Abraham to Sawston as a cycleway locally, because it's lit, it's used in dark evenings, whereas it probably would be not so well used. With the DNA path that I've travelled along today, same as. And we want to decrease the number of barriers rather than increase them. And so I don't know whether we have a specification for these routes, but if they don't include solar studs, I'd like to understand why not. There's a rather unfortunate comment that Greenways are proceeding at pace in the report before us today. And clearly I shared that frustration that we're not doing it early enough. Again, going back to Assembly days, I asked Peter about how we were getting on, whether it was improving. It doesn't feel like we're improving at anywhere near the rate that we hoped. I don't know whether the purchase agreements for land is still a problem. perhaps you could comment on that. Then there's some other things about encouraging use of these when they are in place, and whether we've got some association with Google, for example, and other sat-nav systems that will be able to put these in, because at the moment one of the limitations that we've got for cycle routes is there's no way of using a sat-nav system to properly identify cycle routes. So I'd like us to give some consideration to that, please. And then finally, there's an issue of surface treatments. We know that the non-motorised users, including horse riders particularly, are very keen on having surfaces that are suitable for horse riding and others. And there seems to be a conflict there. So I just wonder whether you've got any comment about that. We have an example that the horse users really applauded, which was the track through Babraham Science Park, which was off-road. In fact, it was inside the curtilage of the science park with enough width of grass alongside the surface, which satisfied everybody. And I just wonder whether that's a model that we aren't following. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy and Brian. Peter, would you like to comment on those?
So that there is often a conflict. I'm going to do equestrians first, and actually, I think we were praised at the Assembly on an equestrian issue, which doesn't happen all the time. But there is absolutely a conflict between the two. The Greenways, we are looking to produce segregated cycling solution that sits within the bailiwick of the city deal, which is to support the sustainable economic development of the area. We are not going to be able to tick every box for equestrians and cycle. We're just not going to do that. And if that's the expectation, then we should be honest. What we've said in terms of the equestrians is we will, in terms of their current facilities, we will not make them any worse, and that where we can, we will improve. Land. If we're suddenly going down the line of trying to acquire land through a compulsory purchase process to support equestrian, that becomes really quite challenging. So I think we need to manage our expectations on that basis. We are lighting some of the greenways, but we're not lighting all of them because the lighting needs to be appropriate to the local circumstances. There are lots of people. I like you. I much rather they were lit. But others have different views, and we need to reflect that, which is why, in terms of Josh's question, we've got workshops going on with various groups, and we need to try and manage that. We need to try and manage that process. The sat-nav, let me take it away. That's not something we've done that. And then in terms of Andy's point on acceleration, we have far more resources on this than we've had previously. We are continuing and will continue to try and suck in all the resource that we can, because every time I go to the Assembly and the board, I hear the same thing, and we're doing our level best to try and meet the expectation that's out there. And so we will continue to try and get more resourcing to deliver as much of this as soon as we reasonably can. Hopefully that was helpful, Chair.
Thank you very much, Peter. Anyone else? Anything to say on this item? I see nobody. We are being recommended to approve the outline business case. We are being recommended to approve the Greenways wayfinding strategy, including the public poll, the outline delivery plan, and the next steps on Water Beach. I will say very briefly that, I think this room is speaking with one voice. Yes, please, let's do this quicker. I don't blame anybody for slacking off or anything like that. It's just so desirable that we would see progress on this. And you've heard my thoughts on Water Beach last time. I won't repeat them, but yes, I think let's try and make the pause as short as possible. Is everyone in favour of everything on the A to D recommendations? Going once, going twice, all done. Thank you very much. Now, before we take item 11, in justice to Niamh, please can we have 5 minutes because I don't think I can sit through it otherwise. Thank you. Indulging me in that break. Can we start again? Come on, Dave. You are in the room and we are therefore quorate, so I will start even if you're still walking. Support. Last, but by absolutely no means least, on our extremely short agenda, she says, we don't have any questions on this, so we will have a presentation from Neve. Yes, I'm cool too. We will have feedback from Tim and we will debate this. So Neve, take it away.
Thank you, Chair. Aside from the kind of usual items that you find in your quarterly progress report, we're asking you, recommending a couple of things. So the first, which is point B on page 110, is for you to note the updated Cambridge Biomedical Campus Transport Needs Study. There's been a bit of a discussion around that already related to the first substantive item, but happy to take any kind of more detailed questions around that. The second is point A, which is around a proposal to increase the skills service provision, which I'll run through. Just ahead of kind of running through that, again, you'll see from the report, in terms of overall progress around the skills work, you'll see it's going reasonably well. There are a few ambers in there, and where there are ambers, again, you'll see that kind of action is underway to try and fix some of that. Some of it's really complicated, some of it's around adults engaging, which has been more difficult than I think any of us thought it would be. But again, action kind of underway to try and get smaller groups of adults together to do some more focused mentoring to try and tackle some of the engagement. On the more substantive point around the kind of extension or increasing some elements of the service, there are two kind of substantive bits of that. The first is around making available to all secondary school students in Greater Cambridge, and I don't know how many there are. I believe it's growing every day, but it's certainly thousands and thousands. That's around putting into each school a new digital platform to make available, as I said, to every secondary school student, as well as kind of allowing us to track the destination of those students. Which is something that the board and the Joint Assembly have talked a lot about to understand what the kind of impact of our investment is having. It will do that, which I think is good, but also it will help them to compare and apply for various opportunities in various sectors, specifically kind of tailored to their skill sets, which we think will be quite useful. We're also asking that as part of the kind of first phase of that, we can provide funding for a researcher to help us understand whether or not, how valuable it really is, and try and kind of get into the depths of some of the data that it's kicking out. There's also something, just to remind you, around being really clear around research and evidence, particularly in the run-up to GCP's next gateway review at the end of 24, beginning of 25, and this is a kind of a part of that, and we'll perhaps bring you more information on how that's going in your next cycle. The second part of this proposal is around providing additional resources for teachers and school staff, which kind of maybe doesn't sound like interventionist, but actually the feedback we're getting from providers and from teachers is that they would very much like some additional resources to support the kind of things that the service is actually delivering. So what that looks like, kind of extra provision for teachers to help deliver some of this stuff, CPD, additional support for the Cambridge Education Festival, as well as extra support to launch a Cambridge curriculum, which again is something that the Board and Joint Assembly have been talking about for some years now. There's also something around resources to literally to transport kids from their school to some of the kind of careers fairs that will be increasingly on around the geography, which is lacking particularly for schools that perhaps don't have the resources that some of the others do. that's a kind of quick run through. There's a bit more detail in the paper, but happy to take any questions or discussion points around that, Chair. Thank you very much.
No, thank you very much, Neve. What did the Joint Assembly have to say on this issue?
We welcome the proposition in terms of the skills work stream, the expansion of service there, and with a rider that we would love it if there could be increased awareness of that. It's a piece of work in the GCP which often is overlooked. Not by the people doing it, of course, but by kind of general awareness of what we're here to do. And a second point in relation to the housing work stream, in relation to our commitment in the city deal for 1,000 extra homes on rural exception sites, which is, as we understand it, a responsibility of the planning authority, because we do not have the levers to deal with that from the GCP, but a concern that the GCP should offer any help that's necessary to the planning authority in the delivery of that. There was a very complicated protocol about how to interpret that right at the beginning of the city deal, and that's how it's proceeded. And that means, I think, that we're topping up what is required from the local plan first, and then only counting towards the incremental after that. And so it's not something that we can, I think, directly influence, but we didn't want to lose touch of that commitment, and so just want to make it clear to the planning service that if they want any extra help that they think we can give, we should do so, because we're actually going to be judged on it.
Tim, thank you very much for that. And may I just say briefly, before I bring anybody else, I echo that stuff you said at the beginning completely. I think I was personally very, very happy to read about the increased spending in skills. It's something we should, it's a pity we've gone on a little bit long and Nick has had to go, but it's something we should continue to work very closely with the combined authority, whose remit encompasses that. Now, I will lay you a bet. This meeting will make the front pages of quite a lot of papers tomorrow, but it won't be this proposal. And that is a pity, and that is a real pity. And I really, really wish that we could talk about this a bit more, because it really does deserve, it deserves appreciation. These things are really important. So thank you, Neve. Thanks everyone for this work continuing, maybe away from the public glare, and perhaps unfairly so. Brian, would you like to, you signalled, did you? Okay,
Thank you, Chair.
Sorry.
Yeah, so I'd like to echo that it won't, it's not the thing that we will be headlining with, unfortunately. I'm interested, and I'm sorry that I haven't had more time to read in detail the updated CBC transport needs study, because as we've heard, that's a critical part of our whole gamut of projects, that we get that assessed and recognised. So thank you for the work on that. I have a 17-year-old daughter who goes to College of West Anglia. On her return over the last 2 weeks, she's had stagecoach bus services removed. So she and many others have been stranded. So it's really important that we continue this liaison with our schools, and particularly under the current circumstances. I've seen headmasters being interviewed saying we don't know what we're going to do from October the 30th onwards to get our children into school. It's ridiculous. And I've got some sympathy with Stagecoach not finding enough drivers, but the reaction to withdrawal of services on a completely arbitrary, with no notification, is just unacceptable. Elsewhere, Dave spoke eloquently earlier about the death of villages, or people being stranded in villages. And rural exception sites do offer us a way of increasing the size of our villages with affordable housing and actually reinforcing our, it's giggling. So, well, I thought so, but the economic viability of villages and whether they can maintain a post office, for example, is one thing that the rural exception sites are really quite effective at doing, at maintaining that viability. So we applaud any moves in those directions. Thank you.
Very much, and I could not agree more. And in fact, you know, I have had this discussion. This kind of goes back to the discussion we had on substantive item 7, I think it was. You know, yes, I have sympathy with the fact that, you know, you can't find enough drivers, but I don't think anyone's standing up anywhere and saying we are having serious difficulties recruiting nurses and doctors. Let's do away with the NHS. You know, that's not the approach. You know, you have difficulties recruiting drivers, you should get on and solve that problem. And we can help, we want to help. And in terms of this is absolutely very pertinent because it's a very rounded discussion that needs to be had. Is there anybody else who would like to speak on this? I see assent. In which case our recommendations are to endorse the proposals about the skills service and note the CBC transport needs study. Everyone in favour? I think that's all done. Thank you very much indeed, Niamh. Thank you very much, everybody, for attending this meeting today. Don't press the button just now. Item 12, date of next meeting, really very easily, 4 p.m. on Thursday, the 15th of December. Where are we? Do we know? We don't know yet. We don't know yet. We shall notify people of that when we do know. I look forward to seeing you all then. Thanks again to everybody for contributing. We've gone on a bit, but I think it was warranted. And everyone have a safe evening and journey home.